My wife divorced me, went on vacation with her affair partner, thinking she'd get my parents' trust fund, but instead, she got a lawsuit. Hello, I'm Aaron, a 30-meter person, and I'm just going to try to write everything down here. I've known my pals have been friends with me my entire life because they claim that I'm the trust fund baby. They always attempted to get close to me, assuming I would be sponsoring alcohol at parties and holding extravagant parties all over the world. But every time I proved to be nothing like that, they abandoned me. My parents do have a sizable trust fund for me, but I am aware of how hard they have worked to earn it. I am aware that money wasn't created overnight and that my father's business may be destroyed by a single error. I therefore put a lot of effort into building on what my father began every single day. But I came so close to making that one error recently. I didn't date anyone while I was in college, except for Ashley, my wife, the love of my life, and 28F. I'm not the kind to casually date or hook up with women. My goal was to date in order to get married. But I drew all the wrong kinds of company when word got out about my parents' wealth. You know, having money makes you popular and makes others want to live off of you. I did occasionally sponsor alcohol and lend money to some of my friends, but nothing extravagant. Nothing that one would anticipate from a trust fund baby. I think it's okay to do things in moderation. In fact, it's crucial because you have to be a member of society. I therefore made an effort to be liked by everyone, although I hardly ever trusted anyone. I met Ashley at my graduation celebration. I struck up a conversation with her informally as she didn't seem to know me. We hit it off right away. After exchanging phone numbers, I took her to McDonald's for our first date. We had an incredible time. I fell in love and she didn't seem to mind that our first date wasn't particularly spectacular. My first love in life was Ashley. She wasn't dull and didn't seem to be making a concerted effort to win my approval. She was just being herself. She was also incredibly intelligent. I seemed to obtain an image that was beyond my budget while I was with her, and I felt normal. She didn't seem surprised at all when I took her to meet my parents after we had been dating for a month. She seems to agree that I was wealthy and impartial. That gave me hope that she wasn't at all put off by my money. She probably wasn't surprised because that was part of her strategy from the beginning, but I didn't realize that at the time. Winning me over was a well-planned tactic because she was well aware of who I was and that I was not seeing anyone. When she met with my parents, she exuded elegance. I fell deeply in love with her because she was so charming. The first female I ever took home was her. My parents were ecstatic about me. She never took any expensive presents from me during the year we dated. The fact that we weren't yet married was the only explanation for her refusal. After a year, I asked her to marry me. She was my parents' ultimate sweetheart. Since she wanted to work to increase our wealth, she told my parents that she only had one request and that they never asked her to quit her job. My mother gave her a hug and expressed their happiness that I had found a wife who was so encouraging. Ashley earned a respectable salary while working for an IT company. My parents threw a party for our second anniversary. They declared their intention to offer Ashley a present and suggested adding her name as a beneficiary in addition to mine. They introduced Rob, the trustee, and Ashley to everyone else. He worked as an accountant for the business that managed the investments and money's legalities. Rob had a daughter and was married. His spouse practiced law at the same firm. My wife's name was listed as one of the beneficiaries, and everything was handled. Ashley had a great relationship with my parents and always tried her hardest to make them happy. As part of her career, she also traveled and worked a lot. Later on, I discovered that whenever my parents hosted a party, she would travel with her affair partner. She constantly wanted to go and looked beautiful. Numerous times during these parties, I witnessed her conversing with Rob in a corner while blushing from the wine she was holding and laughing a bit too much. And even though I was naive and infatuated, I never once considered the possibility that she might be having an affair with Rob. However, these two had been having an affair behind my back the entire time. In retrospect, Ashley surprised me. She is a true professional actor. The idea of ever suspecting her felt sacrilegious because of how beautifully she treated each of us. She was merely waiting though. My parents died within 6 months of one another, about 7 years into our marriage. It was simply too hard to manage all the emotions and still keep the business operating, so I threw myself fully into my profession. Ashley began revealing her actual self for the first time in years at that point. She remained aloof after the funeral. I attempted to give her space since I believed she might be coping with her grief in her own manner. She didn't inquire about my well-being or mention anything about the death of my parents. I found that odd, but I also subconsciously chastised myself for not being able to express my feelings. It took me about 2 weeks before I made the decision to leave work early and speak with Ashley about it. On the way back, I purchased a bunch of pink roses. Since I had my own key, I opened the door and confronted Rob. I asked him if he had come to discuss the trust or something since I was perplexed. Ashley emerged with 2 luggage from behind him. That's when I realized Rob had 2 suitcases too. "Oh dang," Ashley remarked, glancing at me. "I meant to do this quietly. I was going to leave you a note to inform you that I'm moving out, but I suppose we'll have to do it in person now. I'm leaving you, all right?" "Yes, you heard correctly. And yes, after we get back from our trip to Italy, I'll be moving in with Rob. Your parents ensured that I would receive sufficient funds to cover it. We're divorcing then. Rob will now file for divorce as well. Don't look like a helpless puppy now. Are those flowers for me?" "Thank you, I'll take them. Goodbye." Before I could ask her to wait, they had already left. There was silence after I heard the motor revving up. My wife of 8 years abruptly left me. Is the phrase, "the world crashing down in front of you," familiar to you? Well, that sums up my feelings the best. I didn't leave the house for 2 days. I kept the blinds closed. Cup noodles and chilled meals were my only sources of sustenance. I was afraid of the silence, so I never switched off the TV. I had no desire to take a bath. Someone rang the doorbell on the 3rd day. I assumed they would eventually go if I didn't answer the door, but that didn't happen. Whoever it was pressed the bell longer and harder each time it rang. The ringing continued for several minutes after that. Someone was now hammering on the door. "I know you're in there, open up right now," a woman's voice said. "I won't go until I have a little conversation with you." I assumed it was Ashley, but then I recalled that she and Rob were on vacation in Italy. I felt a new surge of melancholy at the concept. I dragged myself out of bed and began opening the door because the banging and knocking wouldn't stop. A woman with red hair wearing a 2-piece suit was waiting for me when I opened the door. It appeared as though she would eat my head off. "Your wife fled with my husband," she remarked. "It won't assist anyone to sit here and be a wimp. In 15 minutes, get up, take a bath, and enter the living room. We have a lot to discuss." As soon as I didn't answer, she opened the door, met my eyes and said, "You stink." "Okay, Mom," I said before I went to the restroom. "I heard that," she yelled back. I laughed in spite of themselves. After my bath, I felt somewhat human again, and the living room looked immaculate when I got back. The kitchen was no exception. Rob's wife Sandra gave her introduction. She explained that she had been attempting to contact me at my workplace for the past 2 days but was unable to do so, so she ultimately made the decision to come to my house. She was serious. What she was telling me was unbelievable. Sandra claimed that, similar to me, she was unaware that Rob was unfaithful to her. Only 2 days ago, when he left the house and promised to send his assistant to get the rest of his belongings, did she find out. Her world was broken, just like mine was, but she didn't mope about it. She began to dig. She started by looking through Rob's laptop. There, he kept his work belongings, but he was hooked onto Facebook. She quickly combed through his conversations to discover who he was having an affair with. She swooped like a hawk once she was certain. She was very certain that Rob was withdrawing funds for his personal purposes after reviewing all of the documents pertaining to my trust fund. He was being helped by one of the beneficiaries, who was none other than Ashley, so it began little enough to go unnoticed, but ultimately he had grown confident and reckless. Although she wasn't lying, I kind of wanted she was. Sandra was prepared to destroy them because she had all the evidence. Sandra said, "I have a little daughter," while I was still unsure. "I'll get every last dime out of Rob, and I'll completely destroy Ashley. What you believe doesn't matter to me. I only wanted to let you know. If you do not wish to participate, you're under no obligation to do so." She exuded confidence and determination, and I knew from away that I could trust her. I was on board then. We exchanged handshakes. We were working on a scheme that would cost my ex-wife a lot of money while she was on vacation in Italy. Rob and Ashley had returned from their 10-day vacation in Italy. Sandra and I wanted to see how they would react when the penny dropped, so we waited for their call. I had been at work on a Monday when Ashley called. She went on a tirade as soon as I answered. "What on earth is going on? What does Rob mean when he says we're having problems? Where's my money too?" "You mean the money from my parents that Rob used to buy you presents and most likely the apartment you moved into," I said. "I hope my lawyer got back to you. It's Rob's wife Sandra, who also happens to be employed at the company." Before she could utter another thing, I hung up and told her I had to leave. That day, Ashley was waiting outside when I left work. She blocked my path as I proceeded toward my car, pretending not to notice her. I had known her for a long time, but I had never seen her so upset by anything. She requested me to explain things to her since she seemed to be having trouble understanding Rob's nervous account of what happened and wanted to hear it from me in simple terms. I informed her that I had learned about the divorce petition from her attorney. The only difference was that she would not receive a single dime. The expression on her face, oh boy. She never would have imagined that this would be taking place. I saw the panic rising within her. After experiencing a moment of cruel pleasure, I felt a great deal of guilt for placing her in this predicament. It's hard to see someone you care about suffer, and I still loved her. I had to leave as soon as possible to avoid being manipulated by her. I brushed her aside and headed for my car. From behind me I heard her yelling. She was requesting that I stop. "How could you do this to me?" was the final thing I heard before getting into the car. I wanted to lash out and tell her that I could ask her the same stupid question because I felt like I was being stabbed. Instead though, I got into my car and left. In my rear-view mirror, I could see her, completely confused, taking care of the automobile. Rob, meantime, had received notification that he would be leaving the organization. He was damaging the company's reputation, and it seems that word had gotten out. Since many customers had contacted to request contract termination, firing Rob was the greatest damage control measure the company could take. Sandra arranged for the best counsel because she had several friends who were lawyers. She was confident that she would win the lawsuit and be granted custody. As I drove home, Sandra was providing me with all of these information. I felt a lot lighter. I wrote this up after returning home. I wanted to let out my frustration after my encounter with Ashley. Is Ashley being treated too harshly, in your opinion? Update 1. Hello to everybody. I have an update now. A week has passed. I appreciate you helping me and getting me back up when I was feeling quite lost. I showed him this Reddit article during our first therapy appointment. It's a good coping mechanism, he said. According to him, it's normal to mourn the person you lost, in this case, Ashley, so it makes sense that I would feel extremely overwhelmed once I revealed the truth. I'll try to give you all a summary of what transpired this week. Ashley gave me another call. Her voice was softer this time. She spoke in a muffled voice, as if she had been sobbing. I was asked if I had eaten dinner. "Do you want me to come over and cook it for you?" she said after I declined. I was surprised. She stated she would be at my house in 30 minutes, so I assumed she interpreted my silence as a yes. No, you won't," I responded, finally finding my voice. "Are you serious? You want to come here, make me supper and set up a playhouse after what you did?" "No, darling," she said. "We can talk, even though I know things haven't been well." At the time, I was going crazy. At this moment, I believe I yelled, "Bad? Do you think what you did was bad? Simply awful? It was evil. It was self-centered and cruel. You're going to hell with it. I would never again want to see your face. What the devil is wrong with you?" I felt like throwing up at the next thing she uttered. "I should stop overreacting," she said. For me, I believe it marked a turning point. At this time, I saw her true self, a woman who didn't regret her acts at all and would do it all over again in a heartbeat, despite the remorse I had been feeling for hurting her. The call was a trap, an attempt to control me. She was unaware of my realization and continued to complain about how I was portraying her in the lawsuit as a gold digger, even though she was actually making money and had a job. I wanted to let her know that I had paid off all of her student loans, so if she was now living nicely, it was thanks to my family and me. She claimed that the only reason she wanted to visit was because she believed we should have a conversation and reconcile, and that I should drop my case since it was useless. It was impossible for me to refrain from asking, "What about Rob?" She claimed that Rob was simply different and that she was having an affair with him because he made her boring existence interesting. She then began accusing me of never being there for her and of being away on business. She claimed that she had a passionate romance with Rob, whereas I lacked it greatly. I was suing her rather than offering her an apology. By this time, I was certain she was attempting to bleed my ear. She could have discussed it with me or we could have attended marriage counseling, I informed her, if she had been experiencing so many issues. The answer was never cheating. She started to insist on coming over and change the subject. After hanging up, I dialed Sandra. I explained what had transpired to her. Sandra requested that I call her back and invite her over. "I will also come over," she responded. She requested me to comply in order to find out her true intentions. I ended my conversation with Sandra and dialed Ashley instead. When she picked up, she sounded so arrogant. She claimed she will be there in 30 minutes and that she knew I would come around. Sandra arrived before Ashley did. There was not enough time for her to explain her plan, and I was unaware of it. She wanted me to make Ashley sit in the dining room after she went inside. Sandra stated that she would appear in this play in a special capacity. About 40 minutes later, Ashley arrived, and it was clear that she had tried to appear presentable. She did look nice. She entered, gave me a kiss and started to go to the bedroom where Sandra was. I halted her and requested that she take a seat in the dining room. "But why, sweetheart?" She pouted as she turned to face me. "Was it easy for me to forfeit my rights? Was your affection so feeble? Baby, will you not stand up for us?" It was then that Sandra emerged from the bedroom. Ashley muttered something along the lines of, "What the hell?" as she appeared too astonished to talk. "Ah, finally, we meet the woman who is dating my useless husband Rob the cheater," Sandra stated with a smirk to Ashley. "You did indeed forfeit your right to the bedroom, I see." Ashley turned to face me and said, "How could you so simply replace me? After stealing all of my joy, you're having an affair with Rob's wife. We owe a lot of money, and now we won't even receive the money from the trust fund. Rob is currently unemployed, and it's unclear who released the information. I could also lose my job. You're incredibly self-centered." "What do you mean we have debts?" Sandra interrupted. "Is it comparable to a joint loan? Are you withdrawing the money and assisting Rob and Miss BL or what?" Ashley swung her around. "Then absolutely, I was. Rob has had my support from the beginning. Do you believe he could have organized such a thing himself? Of course I aided him. Not like you, wicked witch. You have treated him in a condescending manner. He chose me over you for that reason. Leave this place. When your husband is unemployed, how are you able to be here? Why in the world don't you support him and make a statement in his favor?" After giving me a charming smile, Sandra informed me that she believed I should send Ashley home. The task was completed. After receiving the signal, I held the door open for Ashley. Ashley hurled a barrage of insults at us as she walked out. What just happened?" I asked Sandra as she was leaving. Sandra winked at me after pressing stop on a tape. "We got a confession, Aaron," she exclaimed with excitement, her eyes gleaming. "We'll destroy them." She heard me say, "I'm not letting both of them escape. That's Sandra for you, my friends. She is cruel and cunning. I would be afraid of her if I were Rob and Ashley. She simply performs her job too well." Sandra admitted before leaving that she was the one who had clearly leaked the Rob news. I informed her that I was picking up on her intelligence and that I had at least deduced that she was involved. "I'll keep you guys informed. At last, the game is starting. Update 2, I'm back with an update, which I think is a bit early, but I couldn't wait to share it with you all. Sandra is an incredibly vicious murderer." She explained everything in detail and submitted the recording to Ashley's employer. In the note, she stated that someone who would go to such efforts to deceive her loved ones wasn't a trustworthy employee and would likely attempt to steal money from them if she saw a chance. Sandra also had a long-standing friendship with one of Ashley's business colleagues. Sandra's buddy quickly withdrew from a transaction she was about to support, claiming that she had doubts about the reliability of several team members. The agreement was therefore off the table. When Ashley's supervisor heard the news, he was completely distraught. To salvage the deal, they acted quickly and dismissed the offending individual. That's all. My ex-wife was abruptly let go from the corporation. Both of them are currently unemployed and in debt. Sandra informed me that she had been receiving constant calls from Rob. He began messaging her when she didn't answer. She disabled his number and urged him to stop bothering her. "I'm having a great time right now. According to my therapist, who I've been seeing, Ashley ought to serve as a case study on narcissism." That was kind of amusing, lol. After a long time, I burst out laughing. In any case, I'll update you all. Oh, did I mention that Rob had been arrested? Ashley apparently had to take money out of her savings account to cover his bail. Serve them well, lol. For now, goodbye. Update 3. Sandra gave me a call this morning. She was enraged. Rob apparently rang her doorbell intoxicatedly early in the morning and continued to abuse her. The entire incident was captured on her security camera. He tried breaking in when Sandra begged him to leave. Only after Sandra threatened to call the police did he go. The worst part of the entire situation was that Sandra and Rob's daughter, Emily, woke up as a result of all the noise. She witnessed the events and is now traumatized. Children typically suffer after divorce, but witnessing your father go drunk on your doorstep, yelling at your mother, and attempting to break into the house is an entirely different matter. Since then, Emily has refused to leave her room. Sandra needed to go to the police station to file a restraining order, so she asked if I could come over. At such short notice, she was unable to hire a babysitter. I assured her I didn't mind and asked them to call me at work if they needed anything. Sandra went out the door as soon as I arrived. Since Emily hadn't even had breakfast, She advised me to offer her some food if she came out. I went to knock on Emily's room as soon as Sandra left. I got a pin and shattered the lock when no one answered. I have no idea why, but I was feeling suspicious. I was contemplating the worst-case situations during the stillness. I was unable to remain motionless while the youngster was in pain. There was no one in the room when I rushed in, and I was breathing heavily. Then I noticed a slight movement. Emily was concealed beneath the bed. With the exception of her hair, the 3 or 4-year-old daughter looked exactly like her mother and was staring at me with fear in her eyes. She stammered in terror and managed to ask me if Rob had sent me and if I was her dad's buddy. I got down on my knees and said hello. I explained to her that I was actually her mom's friend rather than her father. At that, she appeared to calm down a little. She then began to stare out the window nervously and inquired as to whether her father had left. Since her mother was like a tigress and would do everything in her power to protect her cub, I answered that he was. At that point, she broke down in tears and confided in me about her fear that Rob would break in and harm her mother. I promised her I would never allow that to occur. In addition to losing a parent, this innocent child had witnessed what a terrible monster her father was, and I felt terrible for her. I persuaded her to play her favorite Disney film and come out. I served her some lasagna that I had warmed up. Sandra tells me that Emily was sleeping well on my chest and drooling into her favorite pillow when she returned. Emily clung to my legs and wouldn't let me go that evening when I was ready to go. She sobbed repeatedly before finally admitting that she was afraid Rob would reappear and leave her mother alone. When Sandra rolled her eyes at me, I stopped joking that her mother didn't need to be protected. I stayed the night because I knew it would be very hard to explain a restraining order to a youngster. Emily and I both slept soundly. Sandra served us delicious pancakes the following morning, and I left right away for work. That night, Emily made me swear that I would return to sleep at their place. Well, I suppose that's my life at the moment. Sandra's place is where I have to stay at night. Sandra has yet to find a good child psychologist, despite her best efforts. I'll give you all an update following the initial hearing. Goodbye. Update 4. Well, phew, I guess I haven't given you guys any updates in a while. The initial hearing has concluded. This is what a lay person like me has discovered. Rob and Ashley are completely cooked. Yes, brother, I do mean it. They're barbecue cooked. We have so much damning evidence against them that the matter is really closed. However, given the nature of courts, it is likely to take a long time. Sandra thinks it won't take more than 6 months. She also thinks that they will both be going to jail. Rob and Ashley will definitely not receive any compensation for the divorce. Rob is also required to pay child support. Rob and Ashley were unsuccessful in their employment search. I've learned that Rob works as a janitor at a local club. We witnessed Rob being assaulted by some loan sharks outside the court. For that man, things are looking bleak. He's done. He rushed to Sandra when he saw her outside the court and collapsed at her feet. We now know better, yet he persisted in pleading with her to take him back. According to Sandra's attorney, Rob won't even be granted visitation rights because the case is so strongly in Sandra's favor. I discovered my fiancé and my sister in bed together during my engagement party, and my parents asked me to stay silent to protect her reputation. I am a tenured professor at a large northeastern university, 42F. Since I'm still processing what happened at my wedding and, to be honest, I need some perspective, I need to explain what happened. Let me first briefly explain the dynamics of my family. Lisa, 38F, my younger sister, has always been our parents' favorite. Lisa entered the media industry and became a local TV personality, while I spent years conducting research and writing articles for academic purposes. Our parents were always telling me how successful and gregarious Lisa was. The partiality was brutally evident when I was growing up. Our parents paid top bucks for Lisa to enroll in theatrical classes. I was told to use what we had when I required equipment for my science projects. All our lives, this trend persisted. The only person who really encouraged me to pursue my academic goals was my dad's mother, my grandma Martha. Elena, you have a gift in your mind, she would often tell me. Don't allow someone to make you less bright. While my parents were occupied watching one of Lisa's TV segments, she joined me in celebrating the publication of my first research paper in a famous magazine. After putting a lot of effort into my job, I became one of the youngest female professors in my field. Even though it wasn't the life my parents had in mind, I created a life of which I was proud. Then, during an academic meeting, I met David, 44M. He was pleasant, intelligent, and seemed to have a unique understanding of me. After 2 years of dating, I was ecstatic when David proposed. How did my folks respond? Well, at least you won't be alone with your books anymore. Even more telling was Lisa's response. With the same patronizing grin she had had since she was a young girl, she exclaimed, "At last. I was concerned that you wouldn't meet someone who could cope with your intensity." The celebration of my engagement took place at my parents' home. Lisa insisted on assisting with the arrangements, but her idea of assistance mainly consisted of offering suggestions that were more in line with her preferences and criticizing my selections. She began to visit our home regularly, particularly during my work hours. I assumed she was simply acting in her typical domineering manner. In retrospect, there were a lot of warning signs that I decided to overlook. The way Lisa would enter a room and David's gaze would follow her. How she would laugh at his jokes and touch his arm. Lisa started coming to our neighborhood at the same time that David was spending more and more late nights at the lab. I recall the final instance of normalcy before things went awry. I was standing in the bedroom from my early years, examining old pictures hanging on the wall. Several glitzy photos of Lisa were hidden below my graduation photo. It seemed appropriate, a fitting illustration of my role inside the family. However, what followed? Things took an unexpected turn at that point. Downstairs, the engagement celebration was in full force, and I became aware that I hadn't seen David in a while. I told myself he was probably just making a work call, so I went upstairs to look for him. I heard noises coming from my former bedroom at that moment. My hand was motionless on the doorknob while I stood there for a while. I opened the door even though I had a sneaking suspicion of what I would discover. David and Lisa were entangled on the bed where I grew up. I had spent many evenings studying for my PhD qualifications in the same bed. Lisa lacked even the grace to display embarrassment. "Oh, Elena, you should have known," she continued with that same condescending grin. "I always manage to achieve what I desire." The worst thing. Richard, 40M, a prosperous real estate developer, was Lisa's husband. While his wife ruined my engagement, he was gone on business, most likely closing another $1 million deal. I can't really recall what transpired next. In some way, my legs carried me down the hallway as I backed out of the room. David's voice carried that false sincerity I now knew all too well as he called after me, "Elena, hold on. It isn't what you believe." However, it was precisely what I had assumed. Before my parents caught me, I had already gone halfway down the steps. My expression must have told them everything. "Elena, sweetie, please don't make a scene," was my mother's initial statement. "Consider your sister's union. The marriage of my sister. Not the broken engagement I had. My heart isn't broken. The marriage of my sister." With a low, anxious voice, Dad joined in. "You are aware of Richard's fidelity issues. A prenuptial agreement exists. She might lose everything. Elena, please consider the impact this would have on the family." The family. The same family that had prioritized Lisa's needs at all times. The same family that had disregarded my accomplishments, disparaged my decisions, and now demanded that I shield their golden kid from the repercussions of her own behavior. I passed them and entered the crowded gathering. When I walked in, the room fell silent. They must have noticed something in my face. David came up the stairs, buttoning his shirt hurriedly. Her flawless makeup was a little smudged a few moments later. My voice was unusually steady as I continued. "I apologize, but the engagement is off. I have to go, but please enjoy the food and beverages." Whispers and gasps began instantly. Behind me, I could hear my mother's shoes clicking quickly on the floor, but I continued. I went outside to my car after grabbing my keys. David was beckoning me, demanding an opportunity to clarify. Mom was crying for commitment to the family. Lisa watched from the doorway with the same angry smile, strangely mute. I packed up everything that belonged to David, including his priceless collection of rare scientific papers, books, and clothes, and drove directly home. Everything was placed in boxes. After renting a storage container and dropping off his items, I sent him the address and code to get entry. I then blocked all of his social media accounts, his email, and his phone number. My relatives began sending me messages right away, including guilt trips about how this would ruin Lisa's marriage, pleas to stay quiet about what had happened, and cautions about family loyalty. I also blocked their numbers. I came to a realization that evening while I was sitting by myself in my partially vacant flat. This was more than merely David's treachery. This was the result of my family always picking Lisa over me. I had finally had enough of them choosing her happiness above mine. I inhaled deeply, made a glass of wine for myself, and started methodically clearing out their contact details from my phone. Every time I deleted something, I felt lighter. I was choosing myself for the first time in my life. I put myself into my work after that night. My haven was the university. I worked in the lab for several hours as my research team worked on a molecular biology breakthrough project. Despite noticing my alteration, my co-workers were gracious enough to keep their distance. Richard, the husband of Lisa, arrived at my workplace 3 weeks following the engagement celebration. His normally spotless suit was a little rumpled, and he appeared exhausted. "Simply put, I need to know everything," he said. I was honest with him. He grabbed the armrest of his chair and listened in quiet, his knuckles white. After I was done, he got up, fixed his tie and remarked, "I appreciate your candor. You have at least one family member who respects the truth." Then he went away. My parents' efforts to get in touch with me grew more urgent. Voicemails about mending the family were left by Mom. Dad emailed about forgiving others and moving on. It was surprised that Lisa remained completely silent on the radio. My grandma later told me that Richard was divorcing them and had left their home. My pillar of support throughout this period was my grandmother Martha. She would sit with me, share stories about her personal challenges, and bring home cooked meals. It was her opinion that the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. I was resolved to turn my suffering into something useful. So I concentrated on drafting my next research article. One of the best journals in my profession approved the work. A professor at another university sent me a congrats email the day it was published. Michael, 45M, was his name, and he was an expert in research facility architecture. Michael's email was kind but professional. He remarked that he had read my earlier work and that our departments might work together. I was drawn to his writing style because it demonstrated more than simply professional etiquette. There was a sincere interest in the science. We started a communication regarding the relationship between research efficiency and laboratory design once I replied. Over time, our emails grew longer and more intimate. He talked about how his own family had helped him pursue his unusual career path of integrating scientific study with building. I really ran into him one day when I was buying coffee at the school cafe. I spilt my coffee all over his white shirt while he was at our university for a conference. As I assisted him in cleaning up, Michael grinned and commented, "Well, this is quite different from our email conversations," rather than being upset. He asked if he could get me a coffee substitute. I paused. I had vowed to never date again after David, especially in academic settings. However, Michael was different in some way. Perhaps it was the way his eyelids wrinkled when he grinned or the fact that he made no effort to impress me with his academic background. Observing my hesitancy, he laughed, "I promise I'm not a serial killer. Just a clumsy architect who'd like to replace your coffee and maybe hear more about your latest research in person." "Just coffee," I firmly stated. For the first time in months, I felt at ease as we sat and chatted. David was not like Michael at all. When I told him about my work, he listened. Really listened. With refreshing candor, he told tales of his own endeavors, triumphs and setbacks. He asked if he might see me again before heading out to his next conference session. To my astonishment, I said yes. I sat in my office that night and gazed out over the campus. I felt hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time, when the quad was covered in long shadows from the sinking sun. Not only for a possible romance, but also for the chance to create a life that was really mine, free from Lisa's persistent influence and my family's expectations. My mother texted me, "Lisa is having a hard time." And my phone chimed. "Richard is acting irrationally. She requires her sister." I took a good look at the mail before deleting it without replying. After being torched, certain bridges ought to remain burned. Rather, I opened my email and started composing a letter to Michael regarding a joint study project I was considering. I grinned as I typed, recalling how his eyes had brightened when we talked about the possibilities of multidisciplinary study. Perhaps, just possibly, this was the start of something genuine. Something that was exclusively mine, unaffected by the poisonous relationships of my past. Update 1. 6 months have passed since my previous post. Regarding Michael, the architect I actually ran into at the campus cafe, many of you requested an update. That coffee date ended up into something I never would have imagined. Following our first meeting, we began discussing our joint study project over video calls. Over time, these business-related conversations turned into lengthy discussions on anything from childhood dreams to beloved books. Michael found my passion for academics fascinating. In contrast to my family, who always considered it as a weakness. There was no plan for our first actual date. We met to go over the specifics of the project while he was in town for another conference. We both were aware that we were hungry as the meeting was running late. We eventually found ourselves in a small Italian eatery close to campus, where we chatted and shared a plate of pasta until the waiters began stacking seats. I was particularly struck by how different he seemed from David. Michael did more than just skim my most recent research publication when I mentioned it. He read it carefully and returned with insightful questions. With refreshing candor, he discussed his own professional struggles, such as a recent project that had over its budget. When he inquired about my family, It was the true test. His genuine desire prompted me to open up, despite my initial reluctance. I filled him in on everything, including Lisa, my parents' partiality, and yes, the disastrous engagement party. He just listened, without the customary uncomfortable answers or attempts to protect familial relationships. He then showed me that he really understood by sharing his own experience with a competitive brother. Although our joint endeavor is progressing nicely, we have taken care to keep our personal and professional relationships apart. We mostly see each other on the weekends because his department is in a different state. In fact, the distance has been beneficial since it has allowed us to naturally build trust. He asked me to meet his family last weekend. Considering my past, I was afraid, but it was not what I had anticipated. I was welcomed right once by his mother, Linda, who shared stories about Michael's early architectural efforts and showed me his awkward childhood photos. It seems that he once attempted to use his father's power tools to rebuild their garage. "We've heard about your research work," Linda said, pulling me aside, which was the most bizarre moment. "Michael is constantly praising your brilliance." It was expressed with sincere pride and interest rather than comparison or jealousy. I neglected to add that I recently received an offer at work that would allow me to work closer to Michael's university. It's a prominent position that would greatly boost my career. His initial reaction when I informed him about it was, "That's incredible. Describe the research opportunities in detail." I was ecstatic with my accomplishment and said nothing about what it meant for us. I still haven't agreed to the job. I'm hesitant to make significant life adjustments for a romance after everything that happened with my family and David. However, knowing that Michael would be there for me no matter what, I feel for the first time that I can base this choice on what's best for my career. Last week, my grandmother Martha met him and approved of him. Simply, "He sees you," she said. "Not who he wants you to be, but who you are." It has been quiet to be honest, and I haven't heard from Lisa or my parents in months. Healing sometimes entails letting go of those who don't value you, even if they are family. Update 2. My last update regarding Michael was 3 months ago. I want to share this with the group who helped me get through my worst moments since a lot has transpired. I agreed to work at the university close to Michael's. The change was welcomed by my research team, and we have established a method for remote communication. The main reason the transfer has gone smoothly is that I took my time and properly planned everything. Last weekend the most significant change occurred. I was in Michael's kitchen preparing dinner with him. Instead of the butter I expected, he was holding a little box when he turned back to retrieve something from the refrigerator. He didn't get down on one knee or give a long speech. "You know how we've been talking about combining lab design with research efficiency," he added instead. "Well, I've also been considering merging our lives. What are your thoughts?" The ring was very different from the gaudy one David had given me. It was exquisite and simple. Michael's following statement, "I know your work is important to you," truly touched me. A matching desk lamp is included with the ring for use during late-night research sessions. "Yes," I said, simultaneously crying and laughing. We are invited to an engagement celebration by Michael's parents. Regarding it, Linda has been really kind, often asking if I'm okay with the plans. Michael immediately offered that we forgo the party entirely when I hesitated. However, we're having a small gathering. Just close friends and family, because I don't want my past to control my future. Richard, the ex-husband of my former sister, sent me an unexpected email. He said he's doing well with his new companion and praised me. He appears content now that the divorce is official. Hearing from him was strangely therapeutic. Martha, my grandmother, is overjoyed. She gave me a hug and muttered, "This one's a keeper," after I showed her the ring. She is correct. The small things, like how he turned one of his spare rooms into a makeshift home office for me with a whiteboard for research notes, are what show how much Michael cares. Somehow, most likely through extended family, my parents learned about the engagement. Mom left a voicemail stating that they would like to participate in the celebration and make amends. I have not answered. It's preferable to keep some doors closed. Update 3. My engagement update was 2 months ago, and I wish I could report that everything has gone well since then. I must convey the unexpected turn the wedding preparations have taken. At the lakefront home of Michael's family, we were organizing a small ceremony. Linda has been fantastic. She has always respected our wishes while assisting with arrangements. Only family members, close friends and coworkers who truly support us were on the carefully picked guest list. Then I got an email yesterday that really chilled me. According to what my mother wrote, she and Dad decided to invite Lisa to the wedding. Their logic? She's your only sister, and family should be together on special days. I called Michael right away. "Whatever you want to do, I'm with you," he answered before I could even articulate my panic. "We have the day, not them." I was able to think clearly thanks to his cool backing. When I told my grandmother Martha, she became enraged. After everything they've done, she said, they have no right. I knew I had to deal with this on my own, but she offered to run interference. Before sending it, I wrote and revised my response multiple times. Mom and Dad, I made it very plain that I didn't want Lisa to attend my wedding. This cannot be discussed. You won't be accepted either if you're unable to respect this barrier. Elena. Their reaction was expected. About family togetherness, Mom called in tears. Dad wrote a long email about forgiving others and letting go. They even had some family members contact them on their behalf. Michael has had tremendous support from his parents during this time. Linda called to reassure me that only those invited would be allowed entry to the location due to security measures. Michael's brother James volunteered to deal with any unwelcome visitors directly. My research team's support was the most unexpected. They offered to surround me with a protective circle during the wedding after I brought up the matter in a lab meeting, looking agitated. My department director, Dr. Anderson, even offered to accompany me on my wedding. Last night, Michael and I went over our wedding arrangements. If it made me feel safer, he proposed that we alter the location, the date, or even go on an elopement. However, I no longer wish to allow my family's behavior to dictate my decisions. Therefore, we're sticking to our original intentions while taking extra safety measures. Individual QR codes will be included in the invitations, security will be in place at the location, and most importantly, our chosen family and real friends will be present to support us. Last weekend, my grandmother assisted me in choosing my wedding gown. She said something that made me cry as I stood in front of the mirror. Dear, you're gleaming. Because you're at last free to be who you are, not because of the outfit. Though I'm more resilient than I was previously, I'm still anxious about what Lisa might try. There is more to our wedding than just Michael and I becoming husband and wife. It's about choosing genuine love over poisonous familial relationships, happiness over drama, and tranquility over upheaval. Update 4, it took place. Lisa appeared to my wedding wearing an outfit that looked to be meant to attract attention and was obviously pregnant, despite all of our safety procedures and security measures. She had somehow entered through a service entrance thanks to our parents. Linda hurried in with a pale face when I was in the wedding room. I'm very sorry, Elena, she was brought by them. Your mother made a fuss about not excluding an expectant woman when we attempted to stop them. She didn't have to complete. My parents had already put Lisa in the front row, but Michael sent his brother James to deal with the problem right away. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw the same smug expression on her face that I had witnessed at my engagement party with David. I inhaled deeply and turned to face the mirror. My wrist was adorned with a handcrafted bracelet fashioned by my research team, the exquisite clothing grandmother Martha had assisted me in selecting, and Michael's first present to me, a lovely necklace including a little microscope pendant. What do you want to do? When I called Michael, he inquired. They can still be taken out, or we can put it off. I support you no matter what you decide. I realized then that I had allowed them to dictate my happiness all my life. Not today. We're getting married, I stated confidently. They can stay, but I'm done letting them write my story. The ceremony got underway. Dr. Anderson, the director of my department, escorted me down the aisle with pride. Everything else vanished when I saw Michael waiting for me with love and compassion in his eyes. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves. Everyone laughed when Michael pledged to constantly support my scientific endeavors, adding, even if it means converting more rooms into lab space. From peer reviews to late-night science talks, I vowed to be his partner in everything. The reception followed. I believed I was ready for anything, but I was surprised by what transpired next. Lisa pretended to be the maid of honor and got to her feet, holding a glass of champagne. She began by describing how she had saved me from making terrible mistakes, and how she was always looking out for her big sister. Beneath the table, I felt Michael's fingers clasp mine. I noticed my research team stiffening up, poised to step in. Linda was getting up from her chair a little. However, for the first time in my life, I was able to fight my own fights without assistance. Calmly and professionally, as I would have addressed a lecture hall, I stood up, holding my own glass. I think it's time for the bride to make a toast of her own, I replied. What came next? Well, that merits an update of its own. Let's simply say that speaking your truth with dignity might sometimes be the best form of retaliation rather than being silent. Update 5. Here is what transpired when I made my toast after my previous update regarding Lisa attending my wedding. As I stood there, staring at my sister's arrogant face, I experienced an odd feeling of peace. I'd been lecturing academically for years, so I knew how to control a room. I started by saying, for those who don't know me well, I'm a scientist. We work with truth and facts. So allow me to share some family-related truths. There was a silence in the room. My sister, who was married at the time, was in bed with my then-fiancé 3 years ago. My parents were more concerned with preserving Lisa's reputation than with my wounded heart when I found them. At last, Lisa's smile wavered. Tom, her husband, whom she had brought as a sign of family unity, suddenly got to his feet. His voice was tight as he asked, "The baby, Tom? Is that why you've been avoiding the paternity test?" There was an overwhelming quiet in the room. Lisa placed a protective hand over her growing tummy. I went on, speaking steadily. There has always been a trend in my family. Lisa's happiness comes first. They pleaded with me to remain silent after she ruined my first engagement. They helped her get in when she arrived here without permission. But today, I said, is about true family, the type that makes you stronger rather than weaker. My research group, who take pride in my accomplishments. Michael's family, who embraced me with unmatched warmth. My grandmother, who never failed to recognize me for who I am. Tom was the first to go. Lisa called his name and ran after him. My mother was crying as my parents followed. The room's atmosphere abruptly lightened when the door closed behind them. Then my grandmother got up and held up her glass. In her own words, to Elena and Michael. To truth, to real love, and to the family we choose. The remainder of the reception was excellent. Everyone relaxed without the burden of pretense. My study team secretly practiced a surprise dance, which they performed. I found out the following morning that Tom had requested a paternity test and filed for divorce. For once, I didn't feel obligated to assist in picking up the pieces when Lisa's meticulously constructed world fell apart. Update 6. A year has passed since my wedding and the amazing things that happened there. I wanted to give the community that helped me through everything one last update because so much has changed. Michael and I are expecting our first child, which is the major news initially. My first emotion upon seeing the positive test result was one of terror. It brought back memories of my own familial relationships. However, Michael's answer was ideal. He wrapped his arms around me and said, "This kid's going to have the best mom, a brilliant scientist who knows how to love unconditionally." The family of Michael and Linda has been amazing. Linda was thrilled about my latest research article as well as the baby when we told them. "This child is going to have such an amazing role model," she remarked, describing my work in the journal. I've heard tidbits of information regarding Lisa's situation from my grandmother Martha. Tom's suspicion that the baby wasn't his was validated by the paternity test. She is currently trying to start again while living with our parents. The reality of being a single mother has replaced the opulent lifestyle and fancy clothing. I occasionally have a slight sense of sadness, not precisely guilt, for the way things turned out. Michael's statement, "Consequences aren't cruel, they're just truth in action," comes to mind next. I'm doing well with my research. Michael and I worked together to build a new laboratory, and the university recently granted money for it. His inventive architecture and my research needs make for the ideal combination of our skills. Our work collaboration has only improved our friendship on a personal level. In my new lab, our baby will have a dedicated space, a secure enclosed play area, where they may be close to me as I work. Michael created it himself, adding all the safety features he could think of while still making it engaging for a child's growth. My circumstances haven't changed much, but I have. I no longer feel the need to compete for attention or prove myself. In our household, there is no hierarchy of love or success, only mutual understanding, support, and sincere joy in one another's accomplishments. Grandmother Martha, who is thrilled to be a great-grandmother, comes to visit frequently. She's already crocheting the baby little lab jackets while entertaining us with tales of my own early science projects. Even now, my parents still make an effort to connect, generally through family. I'm not ready, but they want to be involved in their grandchild's life. Some wounds require real change rather than just time to heal. As I reflect on my path, I see that responsibility or blood relationships aren't the key to creating a meaningful family. It's about finding people that love you for who you are, celebrate your happiness, and encourage your aspirations. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who supported me and followed my tale. Although life isn't flawless, it is genuinely and delightfully mine. My mom prioritized my sister's brief romance over supporting me during motherhood and the birth of her grandchild. I, 32F, work as an emergency room physician at a large Boston hospital. My baby was christened 2 days ago after I gave birth to her a few weeks ago. My mother, 58F, is now upset that I did not ask her to the wedding or even select her as a godparent. I would like to describe the complex circumstances that resulted in this choice. My relationship with my ex, 34M, a cardiologist at our hospital, ended during my pregnancy, thus I voluntarily became a single mother. After meeting during residency, we dated for 3 years and lived together for 2, which I considered to be a stable relationship. Given our steady jobs and long-term relationship, I brought up marriage when I found out I was expecting. He said nonetheless, that he needed more time to determine whether he was prepared for marriage. I knew I couldn't wait forever at that point in my life because I had a demanding job in emergency medicine. I threatened to end our relationship if he didn't propose. I'm accustomed to making snap decisions because I work as an emergency room physician, and I was ready to be a single mother. Even before I gave him the ultimatum, I knew in my heart that we would end our relationship. What successful marriage begins with one after all? I was right when he moved out in a matter of weeks. At first, he said he wanted to play the role of father. But he also decided he wasn't prepared for fatherhood following our separation. He's now paying child support after I hired a lawyer and spoke with legal medical colleagues. He is welcome to visit at any time, but he hasn't expressed any interest in me, even though I have full custody. I need to focus on my cardiology fellowship right now, he said, almost as if I weren't balancing my own medical career while pregnant. However, my mother's actions during this whole ordeal are the true problem, not my ex. I was mentally in a bad place when my relationship ended early in my pregnancy. Since we are educated to spot the symptoms of depression as medical professionals, I realized I needed help. My coworkers also noticed, particularly when working lengthy overnight shifts in the emergency room. Families usually help out in these kinds of situations, but my friends were the only ones who really stood by me. While running their own medical practices, my 2 best friends from residency, Kelly, 31F, a pediatrician, and Maria, 32F, another emergency room physician, came to see me as much as they could. I automatically chose them to be my daughter's godmothers because they were the only people who were with me when I went into labor. My mother's exclusion was not a hasty decision. I worked extra ER shifts to earn money for maternity leave while I was pregnant, living alone in my condo close to the hospital. Working 12-hour shifts while pregnant and handling trauma cases wasn't easy. Since Kelly's hospital is distant from mine and Maria is married with a small son, I turned down my friend's offer to stay with me closer to my due date. I had wanted to depend on my mom. She abruptly became more active in my life after finding out about my pregnancy on social media. We weren't very close before that because she usually gave preference to my younger sister, Lisa, 25F. There was an obvious division in our family dynamics. Dad and I were one unit, and Lisa and Mom were another. We only got to see each other on birthdays or holidays once I departed for college. When my dad died 2 years ago after an unexpected heart attack, everything changed. I was working an emergency room shift that night, so I wasn't blind to the irony. My already shaky relationship with my mother and sister was all but broken after his funeral. Even though Lisa and Mom were still inseparable, there was always an imperceptible barrier between us when I first saw them. I eventually came to terms with the fact that Mom valued Lisa more. I found it strange that Mom's conduct altered when I told her I was pregnant. As she started to visit, she expressed her excitement about being a grandma. I phoned her to ask her to stay with me during the last few weeks of my pregnancy, when I was having a lot of back discomfort after working longer shifts. She made a commitment but abruptly canceled, saying she didn't feel safe leaving her house unattended because of thefts in her neighborhood. Despite my severe disappointment, I handled things on my own and didn't pursue the issue. But my mother was the first person I phoned when I went into labor while working the night shift at the hospital. When I told her that I needed her there with me, she first claimed that she was too busy to make it happen. I couldn't comprehend what kind of obligations she could have because it was 2 a.m. on a Sunday. She finally acknowledged that she couldn't be there because she had to be there for Lisa when I pressured her, getting more and more upset in between contractions. She was unable to be with me during the last few weeks of my pregnancy, apparently because Lisa had moved in with her a few weeks prior. Being there for Lisa was the first priority, according to my mother, who revealed that she had recently been abandoned by her boyfriend and was in a very vulnerable state of mind. I was in too much pain to fight, but I honestly couldn't understand how anything could be more significant than being there when your grandchild was born. I hung up after she gave me her explanation and instead called Maria and Kelly. Maria, who works at my hospital, arrived in 15 minutes, took care of all the medical papers, and Kelly arrived right in the delivery room. They supported me the entire time, including helping me get settled for the next few days until I felt confident enough to be alone with the baby. In contrast, my mother didn't get in touch with me for a whole week following the birth of my child. Behaving as casually as if nothing had happened, she texted to ask whether she could come that day. "Hello, sweetie, I thought I'd stop by today to see my granddaughter," she wrote in her message. "What time is most effective?" I didn't reply since that really got under my skin. I acted as though I wasn't home when she unexpectedly arrived that night and stayed until she departed. After that, she kept messaging and tried contacting me multiple times, but I never answered. It's amazing that she never felt the need to express regret or even to admit what had occurred. She continued to send texts like, "Missing my grandbaby" and "Can't wait to babysit," acting as though nothing was wrong. She must have noticed I was angry with her after a time. But rather than offering a clear apology, she had Lisa text me to try to justify what she had done. The fact that Lisa's letter began, "I'm really sorry that mom couldn't be there because of me when you went into labor," only served to exacerbate the problem. However, you must comprehend what I was going through. She went on to say that after dating him for just 2 weeks, she had been dumped by someone she had loved for a very long time. She seems to have had feelings for this man since college. She never made a move because he had a girlfriend at the time. Even after graduating, she remained friends with him, stayed in touch with him, and still harbored feelings for him. After a recent breakup with his fiancée, that guy asked Lisa out 3 weeks later. After 2 weeks of dating, he told her he was not ready for another committed relationship so soon after terminating his long-term one and that he simply wanted to be friends. He blocked her everywhere and called her psychotic and crazy for taking a casual rebound so seriously after Lisa became upset and began to argue with him. In a normal situation, I could have felt sorry for her. However, Lisa is not a youngster going through her first heartbreak. She is 25 years old. He was only using her as a rebound, and she should have known it. Even worse, her friends specifically advised her not to approach him because they knew he had recently ended a committed relationship. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. And I was incensed that our mother chose not to attend her granddaughter's birth because she couldn't handle ending her relationship with a man she had dated for 2 weeks. This came after 9 whole months of feigning excitement over the baby. Since neither of them could see anything wrong with their actions, Lisa's message just made matters worse. I blocked them both on social media, email, and the phone. It was around a week before they tried to get in touch with me again in any other way. The christening ceremony in the church where our family has been for centuries followed. Only a few of my hospital co-workers attended the small, private ceremony, including my aunt, with whom I have a great relationship, and my godmothers, Maria and Kelly. My mother somehow found out about the ceremony even though I'm positive none of these folks told her about it. Since she knows them from her years of volunteering at the church, I have a suspicion that one of the choir women may have told her. I'm going to report the person in question to the church administration because their gossip was very uncalled for and created a lot of drama. When my mother learned, she came to my condo the day after the christening. My mom wouldn't leave, even when I claimed I wasn't home, and I was attempting to put my daughter to sleep after a very demanding morning. She simply continued to ring the doorbell repeatedly. My daughter was becoming more and more agitated by the minute, so after 30 minutes of this, I opened the door to face her. She began scolding me right away for not being designated godmother and not being invited to the christening. We got into a furious disagreement when I told her that I had already made up my mind and that she couldn't change it. Her explanation was that she was merely attempting to support Lisa because, in her words, she was obviously going through something terrible. At least you had your doctor friends by your side, my mother said. However, Lisa's friends had specifically advised her not to date that guy, so she was unable to even discuss her problems with them. All she had to talk to was me, and she was struggling greatly. She moved in with me for that reason. She couldn't stand being by herself. Instead of being so cold and selfish, you ought to have shown more empathy as the older sister. What I was hearing was unbelievable. I told her that I didn't feel sorry for Lisa because she was solely to blame, and I felt even less sorry for my mother because she took the decision to not support me throughout delivery, not to mention to break her commitment to assist me in the last few weeks of my pregnancy. I could hear my daughter crying inside before the conflict got out of hand. I informed my mother that I couldn't waste time arguing with her about her bad decisions because I had to look after my child. Before I phoned security, I urged her to leave and shut the door in her face. Even when she eventually left, things didn't stop there. Since then, a number of my hospital co-workers have informed me that my mother has been disparaging me on social media, calling me evil and self-centered. I've seen the screenshots that people have sent me while I blocked her. I've done everything in my power to be a good mother to both of my daughters, but I guess some people just can't see that. She wrote in one of her posts. I can't be in one place at once. Being cut off from my granddaughter's life is my punishment for choosing to be there for the daughter who had no one else. My heart breaks for Lisa, who still hopes her sister will understand what she was going through, she said in another post. Although Lisa feels bad for causing me to miss the birth of my first grandchild, she is not the issue. I wish some people weren't so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. I was deeply affected by the most recent post. Karma always comes back around, she wrote. When you experience this firsthand as a mother, we'll see how you feel. A mother cannot be selfish, but a child can. So I'll forgive you for everything. A number of family members have contacted me, advising me to simply speak with Lisa and Mom and attempt to comprehend their perspective. My mother's posts have even been shared by certain members of my extended family, who have commented on them about how I'm tearing the family apart. I want an outside opinion even though I don't think I've done anything wrong. The stress of returning to work in the emergency room while taking care of a newborn isn't helping, and I'm aware that pregnancy and new motherhood can make you more emotional and irritable. However, it seems to me that my mother made her decision apparent when she put my sister's 2-week relationship drama ahead of the arrival of her grandson. Every day as physicians, we are taught to make tough choices, some of which require balancing conflicting priorities. That night, my mother made a decision as well. And she must now deal with the fallout. I've made the decision to put my daughter in a stable, drama-free home with folks who have shown they will truly be there for us when we need them. Update 1. Since my last post and the events that followed, I have given this situation a lot of thought from every perspective. Since some of you requested to see what was being stated, I would like to share the specific postings my mother has made since her social media campaign has escalated. I have tried my best to be a good mother to both of my daughters, but I guess some people just can't understand that I can't be everywhere at once, she wrote in her initial post. Therefore, I made the decision to support the daughter who was experiencing the greatest type of heartbreak and had no one else to lean on. Yes, that makes me the world's largest villain, but what does that make the daughter who excluded me from her life for such a trivial reason, and who refused to let me attend my granddaughter's baptism, any less of a monster? The epithet heartless would be appropriate. A few hours later, the second message said, I feel very sorry for Lisa. Lisa continues to hope that perhaps my other daughter will be understanding and attempt to comprehend what she was going through despite everything that has transpired. But I'm aware that it's useless. I know Lisa isn't the issue, but she doesn't want to be the reason I never get to be my first granddaughter's godmother. All I want is for her to see that and quit holding herself responsible for whatever has occurred. Additionally, I wish that some individuals would quit being so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. Yesterday's post, Karma Always Strikes Back, was the most current. A mother cannot be selfish, but a child may, so I will see you through this as a mother and forgive you for anything. She has shared numerous depressing statements about the challenges of motherhood in addition to these significant posts. She has gone to considerable lengths to describe all the drama in detail and paint me as the bad guy for everyone who contacts her directly to ask what's going on. I handle actual situations on a daily basis as an emergency physician. I find it not only upsetting but almost amusing when my mother and family attempt to portray my sister's 2-week relationship drama as some sort of serious problem that excused her from attending her grandchild's birth. I've received regular messages from a number of my relatives and uncles accusing me of being needlessly harsh with my mother and sister. One aunt even said that I should get therapy before I irreversibly harm my relationship with my family since I may be stubborn because of postpartum depression. Additionally, I've gotten messages from members of my extended family that I haven't spoken to in years. They are all suddenly quite knowledgeable about the dynamics of my family. They constantly talking about how supportive my mother was during my pregnancy, conveniently ignoring the fact that her support primarily took the form of remarks on social media and sporadic visits when it suited her. I'm even more sure of my choice now that I've read all of their messages and seen my mother's posts. That night, my mother made her decision. Her daughter going into labor was not as important to her as my sister's romantic disappointment. The facts won't change, no matter how much she tries to change the story. I will refrain from participating in their social media drama. I won't try to explain myself or post my side of the story to relatives who have already made up their minds. My daughter and my career must be my top priorities. I have to take care of a newborn while working 12-hour shifts in the emergency room. I don't have time or energy for folks who are solely interested in making my life more stressful. Through it all, Maria and Kelly have been amazing. In addition to bringing food and checking in on us, they have been volunteering to monitor the baby while I take a break between shifts. I want people like this in my daughter's life, people who are there when it counts, not just when it's convenient. So, no, I don't believe I'm being harsh or callous. Regarding who I can and cannot rely on, I'm being practical. I made my choice and my mother made hers. Update 2. Since my last post, which was about a week ago, things have gotten much worse. My mother must have realized that her online drama campaign wasn't receiving the response she was hoping for because I haven't replied to any of her posts on social media. She made the decision to come see me again this morning, but this time she brought Lisa along. After a particularly long night shift in the emergency room, I was at home trying to get my kid to go asleep when they unexpectedly arrived. They said they wanted to apologize through the door, but I didn't want to get into another argument right then. I was aware that they would ultimately want to clear the air, which would entail repeating everything that had transpired, even if I answered the door and they apologized. I lacked the mental and physical stamina to do that. Through the door, I informed them that I had just placed my kid to sleep and was occupied with her. I clarified that if they truly wanted to apologize, they would have to wait until I was free to speak because I wasn't in the right frame of mind for a conversation at the moment. Knowing that if I was impolite, they may start yelling and wake my daughter, I made an effort to be as courteous as possible. However, they began yelling anyhow, so I shouldn't have bothered to keep things civil. They drove all the way here, and I had refused to even open the door to let them in, so they started scolding me for being rude. Just so you know, I hadn't requested that they do any of that. My mother began yelling at me, accusing me of destroying the family and using my daughter as a weapon against her. Lisa added that I was being theatrical and self-centered about the whole thing. Despite the fact that a baby was napping inside, they continued to get louder and louder. Something inside of me exploded as I heard my daughter begin to stir and fuss via the baby monitor. I opened the door and made it clear that I would call the police and request a restraining order if they didn't leave my property right away. They appeared surprised, most likely because they didn't think I would defend myself. My mother attempted to explain that I was exaggerating and that, as a grandma, she had rights. At least Lisa appeared to understand that I wasn't playing a bluff. She began dragging our mom away. Despite being pulled away, my mother continued to move. She continued to yell things like, "You'll regret this when you need my help," and curse at me while calling me derogatory names. And "you can't deny me my granddaughter indefinitely." As she pulled her away, Lisa murmured to herself that I was always like this, and that I was never able to deal with things like a normal person. I decided not to call the police this time because I didn't want to make things worse, but I won't think twice if they come by again. Their actions are now having an impact on my daughter, so it's no longer just about me. She was crying from all the chaos and completely awake when I returned inside. I've already told the security staff at my building about the incident and given them my sister's and mother's descriptions. In case I ever need to pursue legal action, I also kept a record of everything that happened, including the time and the words that were said. I'm not keeping them away from my daughter because I'm upset about what transpired during my labor, to be clear. They have repeatedly demonstrated that they don't respect boundaries and will always put their own feelings ahead of my daughter's welfare, which is why I'm keeping them away. The most recent instance of such was today. At least their actions made it quite evident that I am not at all like my mother. Even if she may not care about me, I will stop at nothing to shield my child from harmful conduct, even if it means severing familial relations. Update 3. My life has mercifully returned to a manageable pattern since my previous post, which was almost 2 months ago. Overall, things have been going well, despite my extreme workload at work and taking care of my baby. I haven't spoken to my mother or Lisa in weeks, and Maria and Kelly come to visit often to spend time with my kid and me. Lisa continued to try to get in touch for some time. She made several other social media accounts to message me after I blocked her initial one. In those letters, she described how, because Mom was so furious over everything, she had taken the side of our mother in the most recent argument. Lisa asserted that Mom was too arrogant to acknowledge her mistakes because of her advanced age. Lisa asked me to initiate contact in order to help Mom mend her bond with her granddaughter. Regardless of how many texts she sent, I never replied to any of them. She seemed to grow weary of making new accounts eventually and gave up completely. I sincerely appreciate that because my position has not changed. My mother must apologize before I will consider forgiving her. I won't consider allowing her to become a grandmother until after that. I'm perfectly happy with my life as it is right now. Taking care of my baby has become a lot simpler after I switched to more regular day shifts at the hospital. My coworkers have been tremendously supportive, particularly the parents among them. They're aware of the difficulties in juggling a rigorous medical job with being a single mom. Our lives have become even more reliant on Maria and Kelly. My daughter has effectively adopted Maria's 3-year-old boy as her big brother, and it's adorable to watch them interact at our weekend get-togethers. In order to administer all of my daughter's examinations and immunizations individually, Kelly has been organizing her pediatric clinic schedule. It is impossible to overstate the difference between my mother's actions and my friend's unwavering support. My mother and sister appear to think that the secret to establishing relationships is using theatrical gestures and emotional manipulation, even though Maria and Kelly have assimilated into our daily lives effortlessly. They still don't realize that trustworthy behavior, not ostentatious, Theatrical displays of emotion when it suits them is what builds trust. At last, some of my relatives have begun to distance themselves. Some have even expressed regret for becoming involved before fully understanding the situation. Initially supporting my mother, one aunt said that she had observed similar patterns of manipulative conduct from mom in previous family contexts. In this calm setting, my daughter is flourishing. Kelly reassures me that she is in excellent health and that she is meeting all of her developmental goals on time. For both of us, the consistency of our current regimen has been excellent. There are moments when I question whether my mother is aware that she isn't getting to see her granddaughter grow up. She was unable to put her daughter's needs first during one of the most important times in life, not because I'm trying to be spiteful. Her priorities are clear from the fact that she put Lisa's small romantic setback ahead of attending her grandchild's birth. I recognize the irony that, despite my mother accusing me of using my daughter as a weapon, she attempted to mend our relationship, but only on her terms, by utilizing my pregnancy and her position as a grandmother. She desired all of the benefits of being a grandma without having to deal with the obligations or compromises that come with the position. I've gained a great deal of knowledge about motherhood over the last few months. It's now quite evident that being a mother involves being there for your child when they need you, not just when it's convenient or when you want something. My mother's behavior during my pregnancy and labor gave me a clear indication of the type of grandma she would be. Someone who puts Lisa's drama and her own demands before of my daughter's welfare. I'm concentrating on creating the secure, caring atmosphere I want for my daughter to grow up in right now. Even if she doesn't have as many biological relatives, she does have something much more valuable: grown-ups who always prioritize her needs. The door isn't shut all the time. I would think about reintegrating my mother into our life if she ever truly admits her actions and extends a heartfelt apology. However, I refuse to wait for that to occur. Furthermore, I will not jeopardize my daughter's emotional health in the meanwhile. Protecting your child from harmful family dynamics might sometimes be the healthiest thing you can do for them, even if it means avoiding your own mother. At my late husband's funeral, my in-laws returned after 8 years, demanding control of our company and house as his biological parents. Recently, I, a 34-year-old woman, lost my 38-year-old spouse to leukemia. After 10 years of dating and 8 years of marriage, we were business and life partners. As I deal with an unforeseen circumstance that arose at his funeral, I am still trying to digest everything. 5 years ago, my husband received a leukemia diagnosis. In recent months, his condition dramatically worsened despite intensive treatment. He stayed committed to our plastic recycling company, which we started from the beginning, despite his illness. He would video call me to talk about operations and future plans, even from his hospital bed. He was committed and progressive all the way to the end, and that was simply who he was. His funeral last week was where the real trouble started. I was surprised to see my brother-in-law, 40, and my in-laws, both 65 there. After a major falling out over our business endeavor, they had not spoken to us for 8 years. They had consistently given preference to my brother-in-law, treating my husband as though he were somehow less deserving of their care and assistance. They made a concerted effort to dissuade my husband when we first started our firm, saying he was simply mimicking his brother, who had announced a similar initiative. However, this was after we had already completed our market research and started establishing our business. I remained calm and kept my distance from them during the funeral service. But when the majority of people had left, my in-laws came up to me and said they had important things to talk about. At first, people tried to seem understanding by offering their sympathies and inquiring about my husband's last days. I responded succinctly, recalling that they were aware of his health but never paid him a visit during his illness. Then their real motivations became apparent. They began discussing proper inheritance and family responsibilities. To my surprise, they insisted that I give them full control of our company, saying that my brother-in-law could help them run it more effectively. They changed their strategy and demanded our house after I adamantly refused. Their justification was especially offensive. They said that a widow without children didn't require such a large house and that they could make more money by renting out their current residence. Their boldness left me speechless. My husband and I had planned our future together, and this was the house we had created. We have recollections of our lives together in every nook and cranny. It seemed as though they were attempting to obliterate our entire history with their demand. They got combative, threatening legal action and asserting their rights as his parents when I told them that this was not happening at all. They are unaware that my spouse had prepared for this possibility because he thought it might occur. He made a video addressing his parents in particular a month prior to his death. If they ever attempted to seize his assets after his passing, he wanted me to play it for them. I now see why he believed it was important, even if at the time I thought he was being too careful. I have yet to play the video for them. I drove home crying after they threatened me at the funeral, and I didn't think about it until I was by myself in our house. I need to gather my strength before I confront them with the contents of the tape, even though I know it will change everything. I'm concentrating on managing our company for the time being, as my husband and I had intended. He ensured that all the legal documentation was in order at the time of his initial diagnosis. Even though I know I'm right, their demands and threats are making an already unbearably difficult period emotionally taxing for me. I'm having a lot of trouble deciding when to show them the video. A part of me is eager to get it over with, and another part of me wants to wait until they really attempt to file a lawsuit. In any case, I am aware that this is not yet finished. My in-laws' treatment of my spouse throughout his life is painfully recalled by the current circumstance. I observed the glaring disparity in their treatment of their boys when we initially began dating in our mid-20s. Despite his troubles with alcohol and his incapacity to maintain a job, they believed that my brother-in-law could do no wrong. My husband, on the other hand, who put in a great deal of effort at work and always attempted to support his family, was only criticized and dismissed. The last straw for me was a specific Christmas dinner almost 8 years ago. Instead of celebrating the fact that we had just landed our first significant contract for our recycling firm, my in-laws spent the entire evening disparaging our endeavor in comparison to my brother-in-law's comparable business concept. It's important to note that after learning of our achievement, he quickly came up with his strategy. A furious dispute broke out during the dinner when my father-in-law said my husband was overly ambitious and needed to know his place. We didn't really communicate with them again after that. My husband finally understood that their toxic behavior would never change, even though he had always sought their praise despite my advice to advocate for himself. Their total absence during my husband's illness is what makes their current actions even more egregious. We didn't deliberately conceal his leukemia diagnosis from them. Even though they must have been aware of how bad his situation was, they never once inquired about it, sought out, or expressed any desire in getting back together, even though the news had traveled through family connections and they lived in the same city. Over the past 5 years, we have solely concentrated on expanding our company and helping one another during his medical treatment. 3 states had taken notice of our plastic recycling firm, and we were even highlighted in a number of environmental business periodicals. Even on his hardest days in the hospital, my husband would light up when we discussed our most recent projects or our goals for future growth because he was so pleased with what we had created together. His final month of life was especially challenging. When he realized he was running out of time, he started organizing things very methodically. He recorded that video message for his parents, reorganized all of our business records, and revised his will. I recall the day he took the recording. Despite being in his hospital room, he insisted on wearing his favorite business outfit because he was having one of his best days. He handled things with remarkable composure, far more so than I did. He warned me that day, they'll try to take everything we built, not because they need it, but because they never believed in me. Within ourselves. They will want to demonstrate that they were correct all along. He forced me to make a commitment to maintain my ground and defend the things we had created together, including our shared dream as well as our worldly possessions. I've only seen the video message he taped that day once, but it's really impactful. He talks about all the years of partiality, the contemptuous remarks, and the occasions when they choose to believe in his brother rather than him. But in its clarity, it is painful, honest, and unvarnished. It is neither furious nor bitter. He also talks about me, how everything we created together was intended to remain just that, ours, and how I was ultimately the only family he truly had. I received a string of progressively hostile texts from my in-laws the day following the altercation at the burial. They asserted that they were morally entitled to his legacy since they were his parents. Totally ignoring their own part in the alienation, they even implied that I had somehow coerced their son into removing them from his life. I had stolen their son and was now stealing his legacy, and their most recent mail threatened to expose this. My spouse had painstakingly documented everything, which made their threats all the more ridiculous. Every significant choice pertaining to our company was decided upon collaboratively and documented appropriately. All of our accomplishments were the result of years of diligence, forethought, and commitment, exactly the traits his parents had disregarded in him all of his childhood. I came upon a picture from our first business meeting last night while perusing some old pictures at his home office. Sitting at our small leased office space with our first recycling machine, we were so youthful and full of hope. My husband's parents had refused to assist, claiming it was a silly dream, so he had taken out a personal loan to purchase that equipment. By transforming that one machine into a cutting-edge operation with more than 50 employees, we disproved their claims. He had preserved some old emails, including ones from his parents, which I also found. It was like witnessing their relationship fall apart in slow motion as you read through them. Their criticism made every accomplishment seem less significant, and every accomplishment was compared to his brother. In fact, they accused him of wanting to eclipse his brother by launching our company in their most recent email, which was sent 8 years ago. Ironically, they never believed in his legacy when he was alive, but now they say they deserve it. They never paid us a visit, never acknowledged our accomplishments, and never showed any curiosity about what we had constructed. They didn't get in touch, even after our creative recycling technique was highlighted in the local media. However, now that he's gone, they feel the need to take possession of all he put so much effort into creating. They want to challenge the will, according to their most recent threat, which they got this morning. They say they have proof that I had an undue effect on my husband in his last days. It's nearly absurd. He was more focused and resolute than ever in those last days. He made sure that everything was legally guaranteed because he knew exactly what he wanted. My in-laws have no case, according to the legal team at our company, with whom I have been talking. My husband's will is unambiguous and compliant with the law, and everything is appropriately recorded. Additionally, they have encouraged me to preserve all correspondence from my in-laws because their threatening comments can prove helpful in the event that this goes to court. When they unexpectedly arrived at our corporate headquarters yesterday, it was their most recent attempt at intimidation. Demanding to address the board of directors, they created quite a stir in the lobby. It's still the family business we started together, and we don't even have a board. They yelled that they would expose the truth about how their kid was coerced out of his family before our security team had to escort them out. The most agonizing aspect of it all is seeing them destroy their own son's legacy in an effort to seize what he created. My spouse finally realized that nothing he accomplished would ever be good enough after years of attempting to gain their favor. He ultimately found serenity in embracing that and concentrating on our shared life. Everything will be different because of the video he left behind. In addition to addressing their recent attempts to seize his money, he also directly addresses their years of favoritism and emotional manipulation. Speaking with the same quiet strength he often displayed in business meetings, he taped it while sitting in his hospital room in his finest suit on one of his final lucid days. I'm going to their house tomorrow to show them the footage. I've come to the conclusion that waiting any longer is pointless. They must know precisely where they are and why. My husband planned for their behavior since he knew them well enough to anticipate it. It's time for them to hear his parting speech. Just in case things go out of hand, I've already made plans for our lawyer to be available tomorrow. This video's content goes beyond simply criticizing their most recent actions. It provides a thorough description of how they treated him over the course of his life, including particular incidents and dates. Even in this, he was meticulous. The thing that most amazes me about this whole situation is exactly what my spouse predicted it would be. He was aware that they would want to take credit for the things we created together, not because they were proud of them but more because they would never be able to believe that he was successful without their help. He knew that, like they had done during his life, they would attempt to discredit his decisions even after he passed away. The irony is that things may have turned out differently if they had even a small amount of interest in his life during his leukemia battle. However, they made the decision to remain silent throughout his entire sickness, never contacting him or inquiring about his health. They now have the audacity to assert ownership of what he and I jointly constructed. I'm not only defending our company and our house, I'm defending his legacy, our common goal, and the real him, not the son they rejected, but the intelligent, compassionate, and driven man who created something significant in spite of their lack of belief in him. They will finally hear his final words to them tomorrow, and they will see why their allegations are unfounded. I'm currently fortifying myself and getting ready for the future. As he would have desired, the business is still thriving, and his parents will soon, very soon, find out precisely how their son felt about their unexpected interest in his legacy. Update 1. I wanted to share some updates from my last post, which was a week ago. Despite the huge emotional toll of losing my husband and coping with his parents' threats, I'm lucky to have an amazing support network. To assist me cope with this new reality, my parents have temporarily moved in with me. Although he still works, my father has taken up all of my husband's practical responsibilities, including food shopping, housework, and bill payment. I've never been good at remembering to buy necessities. Since our housekeeper just resigned for personal reasons, my mother has been handling the cooking and cleaning. Unbeknownst to me, their presence has been a blessing. Concentrating on my profession has become essential to me. The fantastic team my husband and I created together is primarily responsible for the efficient operation of our company today. Throughout this trying time, they have demonstrated amazing loyalty and support. During our management meeting last week, a number of longtime staff members related how my husband had aided their professional development. Hearing these recollections was both touching and devastating. But sometimes I'm hit hard by the fact that he's not here. His coffee mug was still on the desk, just where he left it on his last day of work, and I almost lost it when I was in his office yesterday trying to find some paperwork. I miss the little things we used to do together. Like having coffee in the morning, talking about company plans, taking lunch together, and even jokingly arguing about how to organize files. The ongoing fear of legal action from my in-laws is what makes things more difficult. Yesterday, their attorney got in touch with our legal team and made nebulous claims regarding familial rights and undue influence. Even though our attorneys told me that these accusations are unfounded, dealing with these attacks during a time of grief is nonetheless extremely taxing. Our clients' and business partners' support has been tremendous. Several people have expressed their confidence in my abilities to continue running the company, and many have written poignant letters about their experiences working with my spouse. It means a lot, especially in light of my in-laws' attempts to cast doubt on my competence to manage the company. In part to keep myself occupied and in part to make sure everything keeps going well, I've been putting in more hours at the office. Our environmental impact objectives have always been very important to my spouse, and I'm committed to upholding and advancing his vision. He was very enthusiastic about a project we are now discussing: the opening of a new recycling center in a neighboring state. Through it all, my parents have been incredible. One of them is always available if I need assistance thanks to the rotation system they have set up. In an attempt to better understand my day-to-day existence, my mother has even begun to study about how our firm is run. In order to filter out any efforts at communication from my in-laws, Dad has been taking care of all the incoming mail and phone calls. Coming home to our residence every evening is the most difficult part. Every room has memories, and without him, it can feel impossible at times. However, I'm making an effort to put more emphasis on my appreciation for the 10 years we had together than on the future we lost. Grief is the cost of love, as my mother always reminds me, and my spouse was worth every cry. Update 2. My in-laws decided to challenge the will 2 weeks ago. Our lawyer told me about the formal proceedings during our recent meeting. Even though we're not overly concerned about the result, dealing with this pointless legal dispute at this already trying time is aggravating. Now my in-laws have changed their strategy. They tried to scare me with their alleged plan in an email they sent me yesterday. They said they were entitled to everything since they were his flesh and blood, and that my attempt to scare them away with the video, which I haven't even shown them yet, wouldn't work. They even went so far as to declare that they no longer only came for the property. They now feel entitled to shares in the company. Fortunately, courts do not function according to what individuals believe they are entitled to. The communication actually thrilled my lawyer, who said it would be helpful proof of their objectives. I sent all of this information to our legal staff, who are constructing a more compelling argument against their assertions. All of this has been made possible by my parents' tremendous support. In the hopes that they could react better to a different set of parents, they even offered to speak with my in-laws, but I turned them down. I want them to proceed with their case at this point because I am certain that it will be a complete waste of their time and money, which is precisely what I desire given their actions. The last several weeks have been hectic, with a steady flow of people coming to see how I'm doing or to express condolences since they were unable to make it to the service. I've hardly had time to think about my own emotions because I've been so busy taking care of business and entertaining myself. However, I nearly lost it the other day while I was in my husband's office trying to find some documents pertaining to my job. I only hoped I could speak to him again, to express my love and miss him, because I could picture him there so vividly. My top priority right now is making sure our company keeps growing. I am aware that he would have preferred that. His drive has inspired me to put in even more effort. Even on the most difficult days, I am motivated to keep going by his vision for the success of our business. With all the paperwork my husband left behind, our legal team is confident in our position. Responses to any possible allegations of undue influence or family rights have already been drafted. Everyone involved in the issue understands the irony of my in-laws attempting to assert any rights after 8 years of total silence. It's touching to see how many lives my husband affected, and my mother has taken to arranging all of the messages and condolence cards we've received. His honesty and inventiveness in the field have been documented by colleagues, business associates, and even rivals. My in-laws' present attempts to portray him as someone who was coerced out of his family are in sharp contrast to these testimonies. The most challenging aspect is keeping my cool during this entire ordeal. Whether it's another threatening email from my in-laws or just the agony of missing him, there are fresh hurdles every day. But I'm committed to preserving everything we created together, not only for me, but also for his legacy. Our senior management team and I will be meeting tomorrow to talk about our expansion plans, which my husband was really looking forward to before he became ill. Even as we navigate these legal obstacles, it feels good to be pursuing his aspirations. I plan to prove him correct when he says that the best form of retaliation is success. Update 3. 2 weeks have passed since my in-laws challenged the will, and yesterday something really intriguing occurred. My brother-in-law, of all people, sent me a note. I was taken aback because we have absolutely nothing to discuss, and it seemed brave of him to get in touch with me considering what his parents are doing. We're absolutely not on terms where we can text each other casually, and we've never been very close. He texted me to ask if he could come over to my house. Something compelled me to give it a shot even though my first reaction was to decline and block his phone. I felt it had something to do with my in-laws, and I had a gut sense this might be significant. I also agreed to meet him because my parents would be home. He brought flowers and offered his condolences when he came, explaining that the circumstances with his parents had prevented him from expressing them appropriately during the burial. This wasn't the kind of behavior I expected, therefore I was surprised by how considerate it was. He had always struck me as being rather noisy and conceited in our past encounters at family get-togethers. Even more unexpectedly, he no longer had the same alcoholic odor as he had years before. His performance appeared to have been thoroughly cleaned up. He rambled on for a while before getting to the subject. He was there to inform me that his parents intended to discredit me and it would not be a pleasant experience. They were making up a story about how I was now rejecting their assertion that my husband had borrowed money from them to launch our company. They intended to spread their lies on social media as they were unable to legally pursue this angle due to the lack of a legally binding contract. I couldn't understand why they believed it would work because it was such a naive plan. But I was glad he came to alert me so I could take preventative action. Then he revealed something more intimate. He had been trying to improve himself over the last few years and had made multiple attempts to get in touch with us. But he lacked the bravery to do so after mistreating his brother for years. He knew it was too late. But now he was here to make amends for everything. I was totally unprepared when he actually began to cry. He was comforted by my father, who was there and prepared him a cup of tea to help him relax. I reassured him that everything would be all right and that I was certain his brother would have valued his gesture when he eventually left. He felt somewhat better as a result of this. In all honesty, I don't believe he was responsible for most of what transpired. Both of his children were let down by their parents. By treating him as the golden child, they believed they were doing him a favor, but in the end, they did neither of their kids any favors and instead spoiled him. I simply feel sorry for them both. They were entitled to better lives and better parents. My viewpoint on this whole situation has changed as a result of my brother-in-law's visit. Both boys were obviously impacted by the poisonous familial dynamics, albeit in different ways. His sibling is just now starting to see the harm their parents inflicted, while my husband found the strength to escape and start a new life. Update 4. After talking to my lawyer, I informed him of what my brother-in-law had told us. In order to use my in-laws' social media posts against them in court, we agreed to wait and see how things would develop. Our legal staff verified that having my brother-in-law testify against his parents would strengthen our case, and he even offered to do so if needed. My in-laws finally posted on social media a few days ago. I emailed them right away to warn them that we would take legal action and file a defamation case if they didn't remove it right away. They probably didn't anticipate such a prompt and stern reaction. When I told them that their own son was now on our side, it probably didn't boost their confidence. Almost instantly, they removed the message, but they insisted in their reply that they would take everything away from me. Their actions have now become nearly monotonous. I blocked their email address and wished them luck with their goals. They can do whatever they want, but now that my brother-in-law, their lone possible ally, is no longer on their side, they will need that luck. I am aware of the irony of the entire situation. They are now frantically striving to leverage family ties they themselves broke years ago in an attempt to obtain a share of the company they once wrote off as a silly dream. All of our legal records, their prior actions, and now the testimony of their own kid all point against them. Our attorneys are optimistic that this will shortly come to an end. They are aware that they are in a precarious position because they promptly took down their defamatory message after being threatened with legal action. Everyone concerned is realizing more and more that they have no case, either morally or legally. Knowing that my spouse was correct all along is what makes me the happiest, not the possibility of winning in court. He diligently prepared for the possibility that they would do something similar. Because of the legal measures he took and the video he left behind, he is still defending what we created together. Our company is still doing very well, and we are proceeding with the plans for growth that my husband was really enthusiastic about. Our clients have been understanding during this entire process, and the team is still very supportive. Honoring his legacy by carrying on with the dream we both shared is ultimately what counts. Now and then, my brother-in-law calls to see how I'm doing. Our family dynamics have changed in a little but significant way. It's never too late for people to own up to their mistakes and make an effort to improve, even though it's too late to save certain relationships. My husband has always had that belief, and I'm beginning to understand why. I am aware that I still have difficult days ahead of me, both personally and professionally, but I am also ready for whatever comes next. That was my husband's responsibility, and I plan to honor him by preserving and expanding everything we created together. My daughter was invited to perform at her cousin's wedding but was later smeared online because her performance drew more attention than the bride. My F49 cousin, F23, asked my daughter, F16, to perform at her wedding reception, but became bitter upon seeing the positive reception to her act. She has since posted about her online, and my daughter is considering quitting original post. I hope this is okay to share here. The reason I'm posting is because of my daughter who's been hurting in the aftermath of a recent performance. I'm sorry in advance for how long this turned out, but any advice from fellow aerialists would be greatly appreciated. My cousin Dana, not real name, had her wedding 2 weeks ago, and she asked if my daughter could perform at her reception. My daughter, Jane, also fake name, has practiced silks lyra for the past few years at a nearby circus studio, and she's also performed with through the studio at small gigs. She hopes to continue into adulthood and become a professional teacher, but this recent incident has shaken her confidence. She has a private Instagram to document her progress performances, and I only post certain performances on my Facebook, her first gig with the studio and her first recital to name a few we're proud of. Some of our relatives saw her performances through my socials, and they watched her perform at her studio's Christmas recital when we hosted Christmas at our home a few years back. Something that surprised her when they visited early to see her. I love how they coordinated that, and Jane said it was her loudest cheering section to date. Dana was one of the relatives who came up early to see her Christmas recital, and she's always been super supportive. She asked me if Jane would be willing to perform at the reception, and I asked on her behalf. Jane was honored and excited when I did, and we already had a portable rig for her too. Though we ended up renting a taller one from her studio. Dana got the idea from a YouTube video featuring an aerialist who performed at a wedding reception, and she showed us while requesting white silks and a white outfit. We scoped out the venue and purchased white silks along with a white costume that Dana approved of, and Jane was really excited throughout. Jane even worked on choreography to a song that Dana requested, and she put a lot of time into it, even asking one of her coaches to help her with it. Dana insisted on paying her for the gig despite Jane not expecting to be paid, and she paid her a few hundred. However, Dana's had a change of heart. Jane received a standing ovation after her performance that surprised her, but we didn't know anything was wrong until Dana went on Facebook a few days later. Dana said she didn't approve of the outfit Jane wore and that she specifically told her to not wear white. She also said my husband and I pressured her to have Jane perform and that the performance gave off an unclassy vibe, lies that my husband and I couldn't believe. We sent Dana numerous costume links, and we purchased the one she liked. There was also nothing wrong with Jane's performance. Dana was one of the people cheering afterwards. Jane received nothing but compliments afterward, but I'm disgusted that she had to see that post after all the work she put into it. The post also had comments disabled for what it's worth. I called Dana to confront her about the lies, but she didn't pick up numerous calls. I then called her parents who, like us, had received messages about her post, and they said that Dana was wrong. They apologized on her behalf and said they were also disgusted. Dana's mom also said that Dana vented to her before making her post a few days after the reception. Dana told her she regretted asking Jane to perform given the attention, compliments and cheers she received for it. Her mom also said that she felt upstaged with Jane wearing white and having to hear how good she was. Dana's parents tried to call her after she made her post, but she didn't answer after their previous conversation ended with her parents telling her she shouldn't be bitter because she specifically asked Jane to perform. Dana's parents reported the post along with us/others, and we've told the truth to those who reached out along with a post to explain our side, stand up for Jane. We have text proof of sending costume links that Dana chose from. Dana's parents also requested to talk to Jane on the phone to apologize for Dana's behavior, and my husband and I told Jane that Dana was wrong, and that we'll be distancing ourselves from Dana permanently. Dana's parents were surprised at her behavior, and we were too having seen her grow up. Granted, we only see extended family for Thanksgiving and Christmas because we live far, but other relatives were surprised too as it seemed to come from left field. Maybe there's a side of Dana we'll never know from our limited holiday, milestone interactions, but our focus is Jane. We've tried to cheer Jane up by offering to take her to dinner among other activities, but she's been hurting, which is why I'm here. Jane hasn't practiced, at home or the studio, since the reception. And I don't want to invade her space at her studio by asking, telling anyone there, in case she doesn't want anyone to know. She asked me to return the white silks and costume after being so excited to receive them. She also said she's going to take an extended break from aerial photography to reconsider if she wants to continue. Aside from aerial photography, she's taken a break from seeing non-aerial friends too, choosing to pretty much keep to herself. We would appreciate any advice from fellow aerialists on how to lift her spirits. We remind her of how we're proud of her, along with the many compliments she received, but she's asked for space and to not talk about it. We're going to respect that and let time do its thing, but we'll consider any advice from other aerialists who can relate to the time and work she put in. Sorry for this being so long, but we appreciate anyone who reads and takes the time to reply. Comments from the first post. Some meat with skin. This is a rare story on this site where everyone, except the villain, does everything right. If this happened to an adult or even an older teenager, she would probably still be hurt, but be able to see that Dana is the one with the issue. But at 16, she's still forming her idea of herself. It sounds like she's taking this all on as a reflection of herself. I'm not someone who can be in the spotlight. My desire to perform hurts my family. I would really consider therapy. You could say all the right things to her, and I bet you have, but at 16 it's hard to hear your mom. Alternatively, and I'm sorry to say this, but is it possible that Dana's new husband gave Jane any inappropriate attention? That might explain why Dana is so upset when she presumably should have known exactly what to expect, although certainly wouldn't excuse it. If there were any opportunities for Jane and the new husband to be alone, I would really look into that also, because it would also explain why Jane hasn't practiced since the reception even though the drama started a few days later. It is an extreme place to go, but I would just ask yourself if there was an opportunity for him to be inappropriate because she is withdrawing from her entire social life. When I was a teenager, driving up to the next city helped me sometimes. Want to take a drive? Is still a question I ask myself when I feel stuck and hopeless. Go to the big aquarium and get cannolis at the outlet mall or something equally random. Maybe she'll open up or get out of her head, or maybe y'all will just have a nice day. Lots of love to you and your family. Mistral 19. Jealousy is horrible, and Dana has just made herself look bad to anyone that came to the wedding. Also, just for reference, I have performed at multiple weddings and have always had a white costume. It suits the theme and is no way comparable to a wedding dress. Leslie Barbnope. I always see aerialists in white at weddings. Take comfort in the internet OP, and hopefully they can use it as a defense with Dana. If she wants to be that way, just post the receipts of how she asked her what to wear, etc. If she's willing to say that for a 16-year-old. Or let it go, it'll pass, because I promise Dana will have some new crazy thing to do very soon. These types always do. Chelsea Sphere 89. The bride is petty, immature and ridiculous. First off, you must see that. Help her see it too if she doesn't already. When people show you who they are, listen. This is a painful, but valuable lesson that your daughter is learning very early in her performance teaching career. Just like any obstacle or difficulty in life standing between us and the things we desire, she has the choice to either let it beat her down, or let it lift her up and make more determined than ever. If she truly wants this and does eventually go on to be an aerial coach and/or performer, she will face even more challenges. This is only serving to prepare her to face those. Making art is vulnerable. Sometimes people won't like it. But that tells you more about them than about you most of the time. We'll love dogs. Dana wanted her wedding to be all about her, which is fair to an extent, but obviously not to this extent, and I think she was happy to have a beautiful performance done for her, but forgot that people will congratulate the performer, rather than the person who hired the performer. Given how extreme the response was, I would be a bit worried what someone else mentioned about the outside chance that Dana's husband said did something inappropriate, but my guess, and hope, is it's just a general attention thing. Regardless, it sounds like you and Dana's parents are handling things as best you can. Defending your daughter but respecting her privacy and boundaries sounds exactly like the right thing to do. Well done you. I would just continue to be there for your daughter in a low-pressure way and make sure she knows she has safe people to talk to whenever she's ready. Maybe see if there are any non-aerial activities any of her friends are down to do with her. Maybe something like rock climbing, which can feel less performance-oriented and attention-grabbing but can still feel fun for an aerialist because there's a fair amount of strength crossover. Hopefully she'll be comfortable with aerial photography again in future, but I think just trying to help her not socially withdraw too much would be good for her well-being for now. So sorry she's going through this. She sounds like a great kid and a very talented aerialist. Update. Before I get into what's happened since my last post, I want to thank everyone who took the time to comment. 2 pieces of advice really stood out, and I'll get to them shortly. Since my original post, Dana's Facebook post is gone. I don't know if she deleted it or enough people reported it for Facebook to remove it, but we're glad it's gone. She never apologized to us, or Jane, or even bothered to call, so our position on being permanently done with Dana stands. My husband and I made a post on my Facebook addressing the lies she's spewed about our daughter, and we shared photo proof of Dana's text where she approved of Jane's white costume from links we sent, not to mention the song choice she sent us too. Better yet, Dana's mother reposted it on her account, which really surprised me. Dana's mother wrote that they loved Jane's act and that they disapproved of Dana's actions. My husband and I also made sure that Jane was okay with us addressing it on Facebook, and she said it was fine. Normally, I wouldn't use Facebook to address drama if aimed at me, but since this involves a grown adult attacking a minor, we felt the need to address it publicly because she disparaged her publicly, and Jane will remember whether we stood up for her or not years from now. I had a chance to speak with Dana's mother since my original post on the phone, and she spoke to Dana again after our last call. Dana reiterated how she regretted asking Jane to perform, but she harped on the standing ovation that bothered her the most. Dana told her that she expected Jane to get some polite applause, but that the overwhelming response really set her over the edge because she expected the loudest cheers to be when she and her husband entered the reception, but that went to Jane instead. Dana and her husband also received a great reception when they entered the reception, but Jane's performance did too, and Dana didn't expect it. Heck, even Jane was surprised by it too. She never received a standing ovation from a solo act before. But Dana's mother believes that if Dana had asked someone to sing who received a similar reception, Dana's jealousy would have been all the same. Someone suggested seeing if Jane would be interested in speaking to a therapist given how hurtful Dana's comments could be for a teen, and Jane said she's open to it so long as it isn't a counselor at school because, as of now, she doesn't want anyone at school or her studio to know about the incident, and she vaguely told the coach who helped her choreograph that it went fine. We will respect her privacy request as it's her right to control the narrative. But in the same vein, I suggested therapy for Dana to Dana's mother since her reaction might be a bigger insecurity, and she said she'd ask. The other thing someone suggested was the possibility of Dana's husband, or anyone, making an inappropriate comment to Jane during the reception that made her shut down and not want to see friends or practice days before Dana's post. My husband decided to ask her, and Jane said no when he did. If something happened, perhaps she'd be more comfortable telling a therapist with time. But on the bright side, she said she might want to try a different aerial studio because she doesn't want to answer questions about how it went, or share a video, at her home studio, so we will help her find somewhere new as she asked. We hope she doesn't permanently leave her current studio because she has friends and coaches who are supportive, and she performs with that studio's troupe at festivals gigs. But I personally understand the need to sometimes go somewhere where nobody knows you for a break, and we hope that that will help her. She hasn't said definitely yet. But if we do, we'll take her. She still wants an extended break from aerial photography in the meantime. But even if or when she goes back, she said she may never want to perform again and would rather do it leisurely, one of the reasons she doesn't want to return to her home studio where she's a part of their troupe. She asked if we'd tell her troupe coach that she won't perform with them anymore if it comes to it. And if that's what she wants down the road, then we will. Hopefully time heals this wound and helps her at least keep the friends she has there, but we can only hope. Comments from the update. Fluffykins_pie. I'm so glad that you and the rest of the family are backing Jane up as much as possible. Hopefully the support you show her now will eventually win out over Dana's hateful behavior. I also hope that Dana actually gets therapy, because going after a minor like that was beyond out of line. Maybe the suggestion coming from her own mom will make Dana reevaluate and make some changes. But regardless, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job parenting. I'm so sorry this happened, but the absolute best thing you can do is just keep showing Jane that you have her back and it's her decision what she decides to do from here. We'd be happy to have her back if and when she decides to return to the aerial community. Half Angel. I can see the positives in here that have happened since the last post. Thank you for updating. I have been thinking of you all. It does sound like Jane is still blaming herself, and that will need unlocking, as that mindset could spill over into other aspects of her life, stopping her achieving her full potential. She needs to realize that this is bridezilla jealousy that got directed towards her, nothing to do with her, and if an aunt had received that attention it too would have got squashed. Perhaps angling her to perform is fine, just never a family wedding again. And please ask her again in a few weeks' time if any inappropriate comments were made or done. Sometimes it can take a while to feel comfortable enough to say it out loud. It's not uncommon for boys to take 30 years before they say something. I feel like her coach needs to know that the performance was amazing, but to know that there was fallout afterwards. They don't need to know exactly, but it will help explain the actions and ease the road back there for Jane. Please give her a big hug from me. I child-proofed for my in-laws visit, but my husband thought I was overreacting. Now he's gone further after day 1 with our nephew. Original post, I am at 26F, and my husband is 29M. We have been married for 5 years and we went to Berlin right after marriage since we both found really well-paying jobs. Meanwhile both of our families, parents, siblings etc., still live back in Greece and we usually visit back occasionally. Now me and my husband don't have any children and we don't plan to have any. We enjoy buying expensive things and experiencing things we never got to as children, such as nice furniture in our home, going to exotic restaurants with friends, travel, hobbies and generally just our lives with each other exactly the way it is. But that's just how my husband thinks. His family is very traditional and every married couple has at least one kid. This time my husband invited my Bill and CL to visit us with their 3-year-old son for 2 weeks. This would be the first time they've traveled with their son and the first time we would be hosting our nephew at our home. Now our nephew is known to be going through the terrible twos and has been throwing tantrums and breaking things lately, so I did some child-proofing in our home a day before my in-laws were due to arrive. I removed all the glass and ceramic decor. I swapped out our linen tablecloth for a plastic one. I locked up our intoxication devices. I also covered our sofas with a plushy fabric cover. Our sofa's fabric is white cashmere, because my nephew likes to snack while watching TV and we can always take it outside and dust off food crumbs. I also changed my maid's schedule to come in 5 days a week instead of 3 so she can help prepare breakfast and make sure the house is tidy. However, when my husband saw all of my changes he kind of got upset. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. And asked me why I don't make these changes when our friends in Berlin who have kids come over for dinner. He also said that he's never seen our friends make these sorts of changes in their own home for their kids. I don't understand this comparison at all. Coming over for dinner for 3 hours and staying at a place for a couple of weeks is very different. And we've visited our in-laws enough to see how chaotic their home can get to the point where my Bill and SIL keep mostly plastic items in their homes for convenience. AITA. Top comments. Tulip afternoon, NTA. Instead of worrying the entire visit that their kid could ruin something expensive, the visiting parents can rest assured that the space has been child-proofed. As long as all the changes don't make the space uncomfortable, for example squeaky plastic couch covers or all decor being hidden so the place is bare, I think it makes a lot of sense. You are making the visit less stressful for everyone. Horror reveal 7618. He told me he felt that I was preparing our house as if we were hosting messy and uncivilized people. He's quoting the definition of a toddler here. OOP is voted NTA Update 1. Same post. Edit. We hadn't spoken since we had our fight last night and my in-laws are supposed to be landing in the morning. My husband brought food from a restaurant I liked and told me he wanted to apologize. He told me he overreacted because he wasn't admitting to himself how different his brother is as a person ever since he became a dad and that his life is going in a very different direction with more financial hardships too, and that makes him angry and helpless. He told me he misdirected his frustration at me and thought what I did was really nice, especially since he is more finicky than I am. I tried my best to make him feel not guilty and responsible for the lives and decisions of other grown-ups. But I'm so relieved he came around on his own. Update 2. Same post. Edit 2. So guys, it's officially day 1 of the in-laws visit and my husband has now gone an extra step and put away most of the lamps in our house because they are glass and super dangerous for a toddler to be around. We have about 35 'cause we hate ceiling lights. When we picked up our in-laws from the airport and were driving them back, my nephew accidentally poured a bag of chips all over the back seat and floor mats. Everyone just laughed, but I know my husband was horrified inside and now he's been vacuuming the backseat area for 2 hours now, lol. Oh, and in-laws super appreciated our baby proofing. My wife poisoned my family against me and took my daughter away, but years later, the truth finally came out. This is a story I never imagined I'd tell publicly, but after all that has happened, I need to get it off my chest. The previous several weeks have been nothing short of a roller coaster. Maybe someone out there can help me figure out if I'm really the terrible guy in all of this. I, 48 million, have experienced a tornado of emotions and experiences over the last decade, and it has all come to a climax in unexpected ways. It all began many years ago, when I married Laura, the mother of my daughter Emily. Laura and I were high school sweethearts, and at first, our bond appeared impenetrable. We were young, full of dreams, and eager to face the world together. But life has a way of tearing apart even the strongest relationships, and it wasn't long before the flaws in our relationship began to appear. Laura came from a wealthy family, accustomed to a life of luxury, whilst I grew up in a more modest home. Despite our disagreements, I loved her profoundly and did my best to provide for her in the way she was accustomed to. But no matter how hard I tried, it wasn't enough. The stress of attempting to meet Laura's expectations weighed heavily on me, and our marriage began to falter. Our relationship deteriorated, and we argued more frequently. I observed Laura appeared detached, as if her mind was elsewhere. I attempted to reach out to figure out what was wrong, but she continually dismissed me, stating that everything was okay. Only later, during the divorce proceedings, did I uncover the tragic reality. Laura had been unfaithful to me several times during our marriage. The revelation struck me like a ton of bricks. All those evenings I worked late to support our family, all the sacrifices I made to keep our marriage afloat, and she had been betraying me the entire time. Despite the grief and betrayal, my first priority was Emily, our daughter. She was just 11 years old at the time, and I wanted to do everything I could to be there for her. But that hope was dashed during the divorce settlement. Laura was determined to portray me as the villain in our story. She accused me of being emotionally distant and inattentive, and even hinted at possible abuse, all of which were false. But Laura was convincing, and she was able to turn my entire family against me, including my parents and siblings. They all believed her narrative and assumed that I had done something dreadful to push her to adultery. It seemed like I was stranded on an island, with no one willing to listen to me. The courtroom battle was ugly, and despite my best efforts, the judge sided with Laura. She was given full custody of Emily, while I was granted limited visitation rights. Laura destroyed even those few opportunities to visit my baby. She frequently forgot about scheduled visits, claiming Emily was unwell or had other commitments. I would volunteer to drive Emily to school or assist her with assignments, but Laura refused to let me play any significant role in her life. My family, who had always been close to Emily, supported Laura and helped her keep my daughter away from me. They were determined to remove me from Emily's life, and I was powerless to stop them. The years that followed were among the most agonizing of my life. It began subtly at first. Emily would be hesitant to visit me, preferring to stay with her mother. Even though it stung, I attempted to understand. After all, children frequently prefer one parent over the other, correct? However, it soon became evident that something more sinister was at work. Emily would come to our appointments with a laundry list of complaints, things I allegedly did or said that depicted me as the evil guy. I was perplexed since none of it was accurate. When I tried to talk to Laura about it, she dismissed my concerns or twisted the conversation to make it appear as if I was crazy or exaggerating. I tried for years to establish a relationship with Emily, but it got increasingly impossible. Phone calls remained unanswered, letters were returned unopened, and my attempts to visit her were met with animosity from Laura and my family. They all seemed intent on erasing me from Emily's life. The worst thing happened when Emily was around 13. She said bluntly that she didn't want to see me anymore. She spoke it with coldness, as if I meant nothing to her. I was devastated. I knew Laura had been telling Emily lies, but I didn't have the heart to drag her through a messy court battle. After all, she wanted to stay with her mother, and separating her from her mother would only exacerbate the situation. I didn't want to be the source of further trouble in her life, so I reluctantly decided to pull back. It was one of the most difficult decisions I'd ever made. I hoped that one day she'd grasp the truth and return to me, but that didn't happen for a long time. Years later, I gradually but steadily moved past that horrific moment in my life. I met Megan, and there was an instant connection between us. Because of my previous experiences, we took our time getting to know each other before getting married. Megan had 2 children of her own, so the majority of my time was spent with them, and we established a life together. While I adored my new family, there was always a part of me that wondered about Emily. How was she doing? What had she become? I contacted Laura several times over the years to inquire about Emily, but she never replied. I tried to convince myself that Emily was better off without me, but I couldn't get rid of the sense that I had abandoned her. Then, unexpectedly, Emily contacted me. She was 20 years old now, and her message was brief and straightforward. She wanted to meet and chat. She stated she needed to know more about our family, including why I wasn't there for her. My heart skipped a beat as I read her message. The prospect of seeing her after all this time made me nervous, but I was not going to pass up the opportunity to see my kid. I was scared but excited. Perhaps this was the moment I had been waiting for all these years. We planned to meet in a quiet cafe. I was nervous as I waited for her to arrive. When she eventually walked in, I barely recognized her. She had matured into a beautiful young woman, but the wrath and sadness in her eyes were undeniable. She had clearly been carrying a lot of anguish for quite some time. We sat across from each other, and the tension was evident. Emily didn't spend time getting to the subject. She needed answers. Answers I knew would be difficult to hear. I took a big breath and started telling her the truth. I did not hold back. I told her everything. How her mother and family had deliberately poisoned her against me, how they had twisted every scenario to make me look terrible, and how I had worked so hard to be a part of her life despite everything. I told her about Laura's infidelity and the lies she told during the divorce. I spent the next 3 hours laying out the facts of what had happened. I had brought up previous court records, text messages, and emails that corroborated my story. I wanted Emily to know that I understood what she had been taught about me over the years, and that I wasn't the monster she had been led to believe. Emily sat startled as I explained what had transpired. She grew up believing that I was the one who had abandoned her, that I didn't care enough to be a part of her life. She found it overwhelming to learn the truth. I could see she was absorbing everything, so I didn't press her to react. I knew that was a lot for her to take in. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. She questioned me why I never fought back, why I didn't do more to stay in her life. That question crushed me. I had to explain that I did not want to place her in the center of a court dispute and that I believed standing back was the best way to protect her. I wanted her to have a good upbringing, even if it meant she despised me for a while. But the truth was that I regretted not battling harder. I regretted allowing Laura and her family to control the story. Emily appeared to be gaining a better understanding of what had happened. She was outraged, partly at me, but largely at her mother. She couldn't believe Laura had gone to such efforts to make herself look like the better parent. Emily realized she had to take action. She stated that she wanted to confront her mother and lay everything out for everyone. I was astonished, but also proud of her for advocating for herself. Emily wasn't the young kid I knew a decade ago. She was a strong lady capable of self-defense. At the same time, I was concerned about the impact this would have on her. I breathed a sigh of relief when she said she wasn't sure how to go with our connection because she'd grown accustomed to having an absent father, but she'd love to meet and talk more. Laura bombarded me with angry phone calls and text messages 2 days later. Emily apparently challenged her with the information I shared. Laura was outraged, accusing me of turning Emily against her and ruining their friendship. I didn't expect Emily's next action. She called me yesterday to say she's going to take Laura to court for parental alienation. She intends to sue for the emotional harm caused by years of lies and manipulation. Laura still calls me constantly now. She is between demanding that I talk Emily out of the lawsuit and threatening. My family is also getting in touch, suddenly wanting to straighten things out and reconnect. I'm at a loss. One could say that Emily's at last knowing the truth relieves some guilt. Conversely, I never meant for things to get this far. Along with Emily, I also have Megan and her children to look for at this point in my life. I'm not sure whether I could manage the same mental strain once more. While Laura and my family should pay for their acts, I don't want to bring further suffering or trouble. I have been essentially torn. Emily deserves praise for searching the truth and for trying to speak out against the mistreatment she has suffered. But I also worry for her. The legal system is harsh, particularly in cases involving families, and I wanted her to suffer less than she already had. From a distance, I attempted to assist her so she could make her own decisions and let her know I was always available for her should she need me. The emotional strain Laura and my family are causing is not even something I can articulate. All of this makes me wonder if, despite this complex scenario, I did the right thing by telling my daughter the truth about her mother and our past. Your advice and views would be much valued. Update 1. Hey everyone, things have turned bad, which was rather natural. Any confrontation with Laura would not be simple since she shows no respect for anyone around her. I only knew that would also include our daughter. Emily came to our house after her argument with her mother. Her eyes were red from crying. She unleashed this time without restraint. She laid everything out, every agonizing aspect of her life for the past 8 years. Laura might have gained custody, but it was abundantly evident that she had no concept what it meant to be a mother, let alone look after a child. Emily related how Laura wasn't even home half of the time. She would be away, occasionally for days on end, leaving Emily to care for herself. Laura was intoxicated and erratic half of the time, when she was home. Emily talked of evenings when Laura would come home in a fury, throwing things, screaming, and occasionally even blaming Emily for her own mistakes and discontent. As she related these events, the loneliness, the anxiety she must have experienced, my heart broke. Still to come though, was the worst. Emily related to us 2 occurrences that still tormented her. She was 13 years old at first. Laura had departed without food or money, alone for the weekend. Emily burned her hand quite severely while trying to prepare something for herself. She was in great agony, but when she tried phoning Laura, she did not answer. Just a child, Emily had to go to the closest hospital with her hand covered in a towel. Alone, Terrified, in pain, she waited hours in the ER before a nurse at last spotted her and attended to her. Emily showed me the scar on her palm, a continual reminder of her mother's negligence. Still worse was the second episode. Laura had been on a drinking frenzy for weeks. She was 15. Emily made every effort to avoid her mother, until one evening Laura became aggressive. In a flash of wrath, she flung a glass at Emily that broke against her leg severely. Emily was in shock and bleeding. Instead of tending to her, Laura yelled at her to tidy the mess. Terrified, Emily covered her leg in an old shirt and headed once more toward the hospital. She wound up needing sutures there. I had a range of emotions as Emily related these tales: sorrow for all the suffering Emily had gone through, and fury at Laura for sending our daughter through this dream. It was not something I had felt in years. She was young and not deserving of any of this. She did not deserve to be left terrified, injured and alone. The one person meant to be defending her ought not to treat her like a burden. This was unmistakable physical and psychological assault. It seemed ironic that Laura's daily routines included the very things she had accused me of dragging Emily away from. Laura should have simply let me look after Emily to prevent all of this. Emily may have had a normal, contented life if she hadn't been so enthralled with her own selfishness and spite. The entire evening Megan and I listened to Emily. We checked to see she felt at ease and understood she was safe now. Megan specifically consoled Emily by holding her hand and telling her none of this was her fault. Having someone console Emily, tell her she was loved and that she mattered, seemed so important to her. Then Emily apologized to me in a moment that was both sad and contradictory. She had nothing to repent of, hence she didn't need to? But she did. She admitted she pushed me away, she was sorry for believing all the lies her mother had taught her, and she should have seen the reality sooner. Her voice faltered as she informed me she had missed me so much over these years and had frequently wondered what life would have been like if she had lived with me instead. I told her how much I had missed her too, how I had never stopped thinking about her, how I had never stopped loving her, and that she did not need to apologize for anything as Laura's games merely served as a victim's stage. That was a mixed feeling. Hearing her apologies hurt, but it also meant that we were at last re-establishing our relationship following all these years apart. I also came to see that I was done running from family strife and playing it safe. Though it meant facing legal conflict with my ex-wife, my daughter's well-being was at risk and I was determined to receive the apology and reparations she deserved. After a restless night of consoling and chatting, Emily and I hatched a strategy early the next morning. We were going to face my family about everything. Every lie, every act of neglect, everything Emily had gone through. I was done with them acting as though they were the ideal family while Laura had helped Emily to ruin her early years. The medical records, text messages, and even some old Laura voicemails Emily had preserved provided the evidence we needed. It was time to tell them just exactly what their complicity had cost. It was time to reveal the truth. Emily seemed anxious, but I could also detect a resolution in her eyes not previously seen. I was going to be right there beside her. She was ready to meet them and defend herself. At last, we would be getting the justice we both deserved, and I knew that whatever happened would be shared by us. Whatever transpires, you folks will be the first to know. It means a lot to have you understand my circumstances and provide constructive remarks. This is absolutely not the end, hence I will come returning with updates. Update 2. Hi everybody, hope everyone is doing fantastic? Think back to the family confrontation Emily and I had scheduled. Well, it happened and it was most certainly memorable. I agreed to pay a surprise visit together with my daughter. I saw the amazement on their faces as soon as we entered the door. They seemed unable to really handle seeing us together, united after all these years. They had never imagined that the years of isolation, manipulation, and deceit could be quickly reversed. Here we were nevertheless, poised side by side ready to face them. The first shock passed swiftly, and they hurried to present their customary worried front. The first person to talk was my mother, whose voice was tinged with phony anxiety as she asked Emily whether I had offended her or harmed her. The implication stung, not because I cared what others thought of Laura, but rather because it demonstrated how firmly they had embraced her story. Though it was a horrible idea, one they appeared to hold without doubt was that I would hurt my own daughter. Perhaps because it would help them to defend their own behavior, they were fast to accept the worst of me. But Emily was no more the terrified, bewildered child Laura knew, and I was not Laura. Emily stepped forward before I could answer. Her voice was firm, full of a quiet strength that made me proud. She urged them to abandon the act, to stop acting as though they cared when throughout the years they had done nothing to support her. Her statements were neither wavering or hesitant. She called them out for their indifference, for standing by while Laura ignored and mistreated her, and for helping to bring about the ruin of her early years. I observed as my siblings and parents struggled to hide their uneasiness. Their looks changed from pretended concern to something more like irritation. They disliked being challenged, particularly not by Emily, who they still considered as a child, someone who ought to be appreciative of whatever sloppiness of attention they had given her. But Emily was no child anymore, and she showed no interest in their empty apologies or explanations. Some of you have inquired how Laura simply set my own family against me. Our relationship has always been complex, underlying animosity and years of unresolved problems entangling it. My siblings and I had never been close. There was always a sense of one-upmanship, of competitiveness, that corroded any possibility of a real bond. Rather than encouraging harmony, my parents had sided with whichever child would have the greatest benefit for them at the time. Laura came to them intending to divorce me, and they saw it as a chance to vent their residual animosity at me. They had not given Emily or me any thought about how it would affect us. Their interests were more in seeing me pushed down a peg than in clearing past records. Emily gave out everything that had happened. How Laura had deserted her, how she had experienced trauma and injuries while they turned a blind eye, and I could see the anxiety rising on their faces. Particularly not by someone they had undervalued for so long, they were not used to being questioned in this manner. It was not only the words that stung, it was Emily's holding of them responsible, refusing to let their typical platitudes absolve them. Of course, we withheld some of what we had. Showing all of our cards at once was not necessary. We had text messages, hospital records, and other data readily able to undermine their well-crafted story. For now, though, we kept most of it under wraps, simply showing enough to make it abundantly evident we were serious. This was a warning, a proclamation that we were done following their guidelines and that things were going to get far more serious, not only some emotional outburst. We fled the house not waiting for any reply. Nothing they could say would make any difference, nothing that would undo the years of suffering and neglect they had let to occur. Emily said one last farewell as we turned away. She advised them to forward it to Laura, therefore alerting her that we were arriving with a somewhat heavy case and she should be ready for it. Although the silence that followed us as we departed was oppressive, it was a silence loaded with unspoken words, the weight of what was to come. Emily and I had marked our line on the sand. There was no turning back. The family has always prospered on separation, on keeping us apart and at conflict with one another. But now, Emily and me standing together, they were the ones who would have to deal with the fallout. I want you to know that I am always reading over each and every comment. All of you have given me some of the best advice. Your help is quite valuable. Update 3. Hello, I want to thank everyone who has supported and advised me based on this narrative. Though I believe we are at last seeing a way forward, the previous few days have been some of the most difficult of my life. So strap up for a long one. I got in touch with one of our lawyers right away following the event at my family's house. Not just to me but also to Emily. I was not ready to let Laura get away with all she had done. Emily startled me nevertheless when I mentioned considering legal action. She wanted no more legalities moving ahead. Far from contrary, it was not that she lacked empathy or that she was forgiving her mother. Emily had different responsibilities now and had lately gone through a lot. She had great ideas for her future and her academic life was vibrant. She could not afford to pause to sue her mother and handle a court dispute. As her dad, I was really proud of her. She was still a brilliant, tenacious young woman with enormous professional possibilities ahead of her after all she had gone through. I did, however, also find myself torn. Part of me wanted Laura to suffer for her deeds, to pay for the suffering she had brought about. One thing I did wrong was ruin my life. Nevertheless, I found unforgivable damage done to Emily, that of robbing her of a normal, happy childhood. I did, however, honor Emily's desires. Unlike her mother's, her view counted here, and it was something I would constantly keep in mind while deciding what to do. Another thing occurred when we were negotiating all of this. 2 days later, Laura's neighbor walked up to our door bearing an envelope. The neighbor said Laura had asked her to bring the mail to us as she was temporarily leaving town. Though I had no idea what to expect, I accepted the envelope and thanked the neighbor. Within the envelope Laura had a note, long and full of apologies and explanations. It sought to defend her behavior. She talked about losing her job, how she grew quite alone when I left, and how events descended from there. She finally landed another job, but it paid little, and she descended into more misery. Drinking became her coping mechanism. She said she never intended to hurt Emily, that she was simply so lost and overwhelmed by her own suffering. Laura continued to go into great detail about more of her challenges, seeking to depict a lady driven to the brink by events beyond her reach. But reading made me focus only on how hollow everything sounded. Laura was obviously trying to justify her actions and project an impression of victimization from her own experiences. But no degree of difficulty could excuse her treatment of Emily. She begged us not to go to legal war at the end of the letter. As a show of kindness, she pledged to avoid Emily. She also offered to pay whatever we felt was appropriate as reparations for the damage she had done. Emily's eyes showed grief as soon as I turned over the letter to her. She had not sought this apology, and it most definitely was not the resolution she was due. What kind of mother leaves her child like this and subsequently believes that money could possibly offset all the years of suffering and neglect? For Emily, it was a terrible insight. I knew she needed time to get through it. Emily needed space, as she would reach out to Megan or me when she was ready. For Emily, someone she could confide in without judgment, my wife Megan had become fast a comfort. Soon Emily became like family to all of us, developing a close relationship with Megan's kids. Although I wanted to assist, I knew Emily would gain more from Megan's support and viewpoint to help her to organize everything. Eventually Emily came to me with her choice. She refused to go after a legal lawsuit. She wanted not to drag things out anymore or become mired in a nasty court struggle. Freed from the shadows of the past, she wanted to start anew and concentrate on her and her future. Emily was ready to go on, and I knew this was the right decision even if I wanted justice for her. She had lived under the weight of her mother's errors for sufficient time. She was ready to live her life on her terms. Emily's choice sent us into a fresh chapter. She began concentrating more on her academics, directing her efforts toward her objectives and dreams. As Megan negotiated this new stage of her life, Megan and I kept helping her in all possible respects, providing direction and encouragement. Regarding myself, this seems like a dream. Things cannot have concluded on a better note. I have 3 children and an incredible wife at my side. Though the trip had been protracted and agonizing, at last we had returned to one another. More than all, that was the real success in all of this. Once more, I appreciate all of your support. Though it's been an incredible journey, I believe we are at last headed toward recovery. Parents demand I cancel my wedding for sister's engagement, but the truth about her cheating changed everything. Engaged to my fiancé Jake, 30 million, I, a 28-year-old lady, have been for roughly 8 months. Up until last week, when my parents shocked us, our October wedding was scheduled and all was going according to plan. For background, Mia, 25F, our younger sister, has always been the golden child in our family. She has been seeing Tom, 26 million, her lover, for around 2 years. In practically every sphere of our existence, my parents have always showered Mia with royal care. Though I hate to sound negative, I have always felt as though hers dominates my successes. Mia was a cheerleader while I was a straight-A student playing on the volleyball team back in high school. Her achievements always seemed to eclipse all mine. Not to get me wrong, cheerleading merits just as much respect as any other sport, but would it have killed my parents to exhibit the same fervor for my events? I grew used to my absent parents and learned to expect almost little from them. I thus cut myself off from Mia, though deep down I knew it wasn't her responsibility. My immature self blamed mom for everything. My viewpoint altered only in college, when I met Jake, the love of my life. He let me see that I deserved just as much attention as everyone else and was deserving of affection. Jake showed me that every one of us is unique in our own right and that, should someone not value my accomplishments, well, that is their loss. I also realized that it was unfair to hold Mia totally responsible when our parents were clearly in charge. I thus resolved to try to rebuild whatever sisterly relationship we still had. I started letting her know she could talk to me about anything and checking up on her more often. She first hesitated naturally, but she soon grew more at ease sharing with me. We discussed practically anything, regardless of its silliness or gravity. Though our tastes and paths of life were different, I was glad our connection was getting better gradually. We seemed to be at last the sisters we ought to have been all along. Mia knew first when Jake proposed to her. Telling me she couldn't wait to help arrange my wedding, she was as eager as I was. Everything seemed ideal at that point. I was therefore really taken aback when my mother called last Wednesday. The call began innocuously enough. Mom inquired about wedding preparations, which was odd given her previous lack of enthusiasm. I ought to have seen something was wrong. She finally got right to the point after a few minutes of small talk. Mia and Tom were getting engaged. I started to be delighted for my sister as soon as those words emerged from her mouth. Better than this, what could be? Then I noticed Mom had stated, planning to get engaged, which threw me off. Mom said Mia had told her Tom had been hinting at proposing when I asked her what she meant by that. He had done all the other usual things, asked about her ring size, advised her to get a new outfit, and told her. Although these were rather clear indicators, Mia always had a tendency of romanticizing everything and exaggerating events to make them appear more than they really were. I wanted Mia not to have her expectations skyrocketing only to be let down. When I asked Mom whether she was absolutely convinced Tom was proposing, she answered boldly. That would have marked the end of the call, but another surprise was approaching, one I would not be pleased about. My mother asked me to call off our wedding since Tom and Mia were apparently engaged. I let out a gasp. Though I must have misinterpreted, I asked her to clarify. No, she was dead serious. For 10 months I had been planning. She wanted me to call off the wedding Jake had proposed. We had waited this long since we wanted the wedding of our dreams and refused to compromise on anything. Deposits for the caterers and other suppliers had already been laid down. Not to mention the inconvenience of rearranging things, moving everything back a year would entail losing a large sum of money. What had descended upon Mom and Dad was unknown to me. When we were short on money, they had volunteered to cover the venue. I assumed this was because they were at last interested in my life. Looking back, it seemed like they did it to challenge Jake's parents. But I was too delighted at the time to pay attention to their hidden agendas. Wait, though, this was not even the worst of things. You haven't heard the rationale behind my planned delay of my wedding for Mia's expected engagement. Mom clarified that Mia wanted to be the center of attention for a full year, complete with announcements on social media and engagement pictures. I could not understand at all. Who loses money over something as flimsy as social media and calls their sister off from her wedding? Promising not to post anything about my wedding online, I tried to argue with Mom, but she claimed they would withdraw all the money they had promised for the wedding should I refuse to postpone it. Their lovely daughter was an attention seeker, hence at this time they were virtually blackmailing me. This was ludicrous and unfair, I told my mother. We debated for some time, her arguing that I was being thoughtless of Mia's sentiments and selfish. What about my feelings? I asked repeatedly. Still, I received no meaningful response. She responded simply that they wouldn't pay for the venue should I proceed with the wedding. I got furious. All my life, I gave things up for Mia's sake. Now, when I was at last ready to experience the day of my dreams, that too was being robbed from me. Out of pure annoyance and rage, I did something I never would have done. I contacted Mia's fiancé, Tom, to let him know something about Mia he didn't know. The four of us, Jake and I, Mia and Tom, went on a double date some years ago when everything was good. One of those few times when we all had time to hang around together. I recall being quite content. We laughed, told stories, and for once everything seemed ideal. Mia and I excused ourselves to the bathroom to freshen at one point throughout the evening. Mia handed me her phone to hold as we corrected our makeup so she could wash her hands. A text message suddenly sprang up on the screen. It came from someone called Mike wondering whether they might get back together. My heart still missed a beat. Though I heard Mia had dated someone some years ago, I felt he was no more relevant. Not sure I could resist asking, "Who's Mike, and why is he asking to meet again?" Mia started to spin right away. She dismissed it, believing it was nothing, just some old acquaintance extending outreach. Still, I could see her eyes ablaze with dread. I questioned once more whether something was developing between her and Mike. She said she had some texting back and forth, but she insisted it was not major. She shrugged her eyes and replied lightly, "Tom didn't need to know, it's nothing," when I inquired whether Tom knew about this. Tom seemed to be a nice man totally loving Mia. Though I couldn't get rid of the uncomfortable sensation, I let it pass since Mia later on told me she was no longer corresponding with her ex. Right then, as Mia was trying to rob me of my bliss, my thoughts went crazy. I lay it all out when I phoned Tom, roughly following the text I had seen that day. And should that not be sufficient, I advised him to monitor his girlfriend. Looking back, I realized this was sort of improper, not the sort of truth I should have been imparting to Tom, of course, but the way I did it. But already it was too late. I spoke with Tom 2 days ago, and then Mom called. Just say I was glad I wasn't in front of her. She was yelling like a crazed person, as though a tragedy had hit. Her comments really impacted me as I had made a major error. Tom apparently told Mia they needed to talk when phoning her. Mia got all ready even though she was about to be engaged, but when she at last arrived at the location, Tom was quite irate. He inquired whether that was accurate and reiterated what I had said. Mia first denied it, but she grew angry when Tom wanted to see her phone, telling him he should believe her. Tom split from Mia at last. Mom and Dad never seemed likely to pardon me for this. Mom yelled at me, and I could hear Mia berating me in the backdrop. I kept apologizing, saying I only did this because they insisted I call off my wedding. I told them I had worked very hard on it. Dad's ruling then was that he was taking back the money they had set aside for the venue. I felt as like I had lost everything, my parents, Mia, and any chance for a marriage at that same instant. Given what had happened, I knew Jake would not be pleased with me either. When I attempted phoning Mia to have a conversation, she didn't respond to my calls or texts. At the time, Jake was on a business trip, hence he was not aware that our wedding was under risk, partially because to me, though it wasn't entirely my fault, the stress was intolerable and I felt bad for damaging Mia's relationship. I at last told Jake everything when he returned from his trip. He was quite helpful and encouraged me that we would work things out together. It relieves me. He helped me see that I ought to have done it even earlier, as being honest was the correct thing to do. Regarding the wedding, Jake and I decided to proceed even if it meant lowering expenses. We began generating ideas for financial savings. We contacted relatives and friends, outlining the circumstances and requesting assistance. Unbelievably, one of Jake's pals came to save us. He came upon us at a classy but reasonably priced location via one of his contacts. Given the current situation, we simply have to delay the wedding somewhat more, which is quite okay with me. I was attempting to stay in touch with my parents throughout this. Looking back, I'm not sure why I did this. At the time, I was afraid of being let down. I was living with guilt. Still, they were obstinate, refusing to show up for my wedding if it proceeded as scheduled. The wedding was still under preparation, and despite all the challenges, everything began to fall together. Sadly, many of my family RSVP'd that they would not be going or responded little at all. I could guess the news had gone without having to be Sherlock. One of my aunts told me Mom and Mia had depicted me as a soap opera villain who lied to undermine her sister's happiness and could not accept it. They even changed the story, saying Mia was already engaged and preparing to wed, but I later got engaged to take the front stage. Ignoring me was one thing, lying about my character took effort. By now I was exhausted. After all that had happened, I couldn't look and feel my best for a wedding. Simultaneously, I struggled to let my parents define me as they had throughout their lifetime. They accused me of being envious and cruel, attributing Mia's life destruction to me. Mia, on the other hand, was in ruins. She hadn't spoken to me since the incident, hence even though I knew what I did was appropriate, I felt awful. So, I'm asking you. Am I the a-hole for not postponing my wedding and informing Mia's fiancé of her cheating? Update. I published a few days ago, and the reaction has been really strong. Unbelievably, my parents began talking to me, but not for the reasons you might guess. They insisted that I apologize to Mia and somehow sort things out with Tom. Should I fail, they even threatened to have me disowned. Through all of this, Jake has been rather encouraging, telling me we did the right thing and we should concentrate on our forthcoming wedding. But at last Mia got back to me. Furious and devastated, she accused me of destroying her life and undermining her happiness out of spite. The talk was challenging. She wasn't open to hearing me try to explain my perspective. She persisted in arguing, regardless of what she had done, I had no right to meddle in her relationship. I lost my cool and asked her who gave her the right to believe she could influence my wedding plans that had been in place long before she was almost engaged. She hung up before I could even bring up the lies Mom and she had been telling about me. Meg, a childhood acquaintance I hadn't heard from in years, called me out of the blue when word of the family strife spread like wildfire. After moving out for college, I had disconnected from Meg, and our only means of contact was social media. But Mia had kept in touch with her for a bit longer. Their friendship reached into their early 20s. Meg also disclosed another startling story concerning Mia's adultery, one that happened around a year ago. Meg's 25th birthday celebration was attended by Mia without her then boyfriend Tom, who presumably was on a trip. Meg saw Mia growing more flirty with various male visitors, including her boyfriend, as the evening progressed and practically everyone was intoxicated. Meg first dismissed it as Mia's usual manner, she had always been a natural flirt. Meg knew, though, she hadn't seen Mia or her partner for some time as the celebration drew to an end and guests started to leave. Red-handed together in another room, they were caught. Given Mia and Tom had been dating 2 to 3 years at the time, this was very embarrassing. The episode split Meg and Mia and destroyed their friendship. When Meg learned about everything, she assumed I should know that Mia did nothing by mistake. She had become accustomed to this conduct and had somehow always gotten away with it. This fresh material really surprised me. Mia's dishonesty, I came to see, was not a one-time error but rather a habit. I asked Meg only one favor. Could she kindly forward this news to Tom herself? I was acting for a cause. When my fiancé Jake visited Tom, he was not doing well. Though he didn't say it, I'm sure he was also blaming me for what I had told him. He was second-guessing everything. Better still if someone else than me delivered this terrible news. I also wanted to avoid feeding the story that I was jealous of Mia, hence I didn't want to do this myself. Tom wanted to meet personally to go over things as soon as he received word from Meg. I accepted, expecting for some sort of conclusion or at least clear the air. Tom clearly was in shock from all that had transpired when we met at a neighborhood coffee shop. Meg's disclosure came to him like yet another wave, yet it was welcome to at last know the truth. Tom related how his split from Mia turned out. Mia was right to believe Tom intended to pop the question to her. Following our talk, he challenged Mia about the cheating, and she finally came clean. Though crushed, he valued my candor. He claimed it was preferable to know the truth now than to learn later, maybe following marriage. Tom said he had thought something was awry in their relationship for some time but couldn't pin it down until I phoned. We spoke for a lengthy period during which Tom revealed he intended to set aside time for personal healing and life review. Though it hurt, he appreciated me for having the guts to tell him the truth. Knowing I had done the right thing by being truthful with Tom, this chat brought me closure. Still, things with my family have not gotten better. My parents still support Mia. They think I was out of line and must make apologies. Focusing just on Mia's pain and neglecting the fact she cheated, they cannot seem to understand why I did what I did. Friends and relatives who learned about the circumstances have also been quite helpful. Many expressed shock at the way my parents behaved and praised me for defending what was right. Though I have a mixed bag of feelings, I am appreciative of the help from people who see my viewpoint. I'm trying to keep concentrated on the good and keep wedding planning underway. Despite the threats from his parents, Jake and I have decided to carry out our plans. We have changed the budget and are working to create the wedding unique without their financial support. Though I know the drama is not over, I am resolved to stick to my position. I refuse to allow Mia's behavior or the inclination of my parents define my existence anymore. I have to give my future with Jake top priority and my happiness. Hey, everyone. Every moment that passes makes my life seem to get more convoluted. About 4 days following my initial update, events changed dramatically and unexpectedly. Just as I felt the situation could not get worse, it did. Trying to concentrate, I was at work when Jake called urgently. Panicked, he told me to head straight home. Fuming something horrible, I rushed back. When I got here, Jake seemed obviously upset. He handed me a note that had dropped under our door. It came from a lawyer standing in for my parents. Over the consequences from Mia's failed engagement, they were threatening to sue me for emotional suffering and slanderous remarks. I was astounded. My own parents were suing me. The letter explained how my actions had destroyed Mia's reputation and brought her great emotional suffering. It called for a public apology, a retraction of my remarks on Mia's adultery, and a sizable payback in money. To be as nasty as possible, my parents had stretched every limit. My phone buzzed as I went over the letter. Mia was the one calling constantly. At last, looking for some answers, I took up Mia's voice carrying a mix of desperation and wrath. Saying I had destroyed her life and she had nothing left, she screamed at me. She said she had lost her work since Tom had informed colleagues and mutual acquaintances of hers about her adultery. The word had gone like wildfire, and she was today the target of rumors and criticism. She was deemed problematic, which resulted in her termination. Having my parents send me that legal fear, I felt Mia got what she deserved. She was inconsolable even though I tried to reason with her, stressing that she had to own her actions. Claiming that I had always wanted to see her fail, she charged me with being envious and bitter. The chat made me feel forlorn and exhausted. The rest of the evening, Jake and I went over our choices. Although we couldn't let my parents pressure us into compliance, we couldn't afford to get caught in a legal fight with them. This legal fight would simply mark the nail in the coffin, as I believe they knew we were already juggling our wedding budget. I contacted a lawyer for help the next day. The circumstances stunned him, but he reassured me our case was strong. He advised us to compile proof of Mia's adultery and how it affected her relationship to Tom. Should my parents carry out their threats, he also cautioned us to get ready for a counterclaim. All of this was going on when I got another unplanned call, this one from Tom's mother. Having heard about the circumstances, she wanted to thank me for guiding Tom toward the truth. Tom was devastated, she remarked, but he was glad to learn before committing himself for lifetime. She also said Tom intended to start again in another city. Her call provided a minor solace among all the turmoil. It let me realize that by being honest, I had done the right thing even with the instantaneous fallout. Though they may act as outrageously as they wanted, my parents and Mia would remain in the wrong. That weekend, things took yet another drastic turn. Unexpectedly showing up at our residence were my folks furious. They insisted on talking with me. Though Jake tried to calm them, it soon turned into a shouting contest. While my mother wailed and begged me to mend things with Mia, my father claimed I had destroyed the family. Should I fail to meet their expectations, they reiterated their threats to cut me off financially and go on with the lawsuit. I stayed put, not cowering into compliance. I told them I would not be sorry for speaking the truth. Mia's actions have consequences. My parents stormed out at the end of the confrontation, resolved to start the case. The next several days were a haze of emotional upheaval and legal discussions. Though Jake and I tried to concentrate on our wedding preparations, the tension was too great. Extended family members who had heard about the circumstances started messaging us. Some offered support while others attacked my behavior. Although Jake didn't deserve all this drama, I really detested dragging him through it, but I was also appreciative of his unflinching support. In among all this, Meg, the childhood friend who had informed me of Mia's past infidelity, sent me an unexpected note. Should my parents want to take legal action, her offer to submit a statement regarding what had happened at her party may be very important proof. Meg's encouragement and the data we were compiling helped me to begin to see hope. Although it was obvious that this struggle was far from finished, I resolved myself to stick to what was right. As I am working on it, I also want to thank you all for being my support network during this period. Though it hasn't been simple, you have clearly shown me direction. I will see you folks a little. Hello, everyone. After several more days, the issue has gotten quite hot. Mia and my dad insisted on getting together personally to go over everything. Jake and I consented, believing this encounter could at last provide some clarity and closure. We agreed to get together in our place so we might manage the surroundings and steer clear of a public display. There was clear tension in the air as my parents and Mia showed up. When they sat down, I could see the expectation in their eyes. Though I had no intention of backing down, they most likely assumed I would be apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I began with tackling the elephant in the room. My parents and Mia looked perplexedly, obviously not expecting this. I informed them, I understand why everyone is here today, but before we go any further, I want to make one thing clear. I'm here to lay out the facts. I inhaled deeply and started making my point. I began with the couple months ago. I questioned Mia if it wasn't true that she handed me her phone during our double-date dinner and that I found she was chatting to Mike, her ex-boyfriend, when she was in a very committed relationship with Tom. She said she made a one-time error, but we both knew it wasn't accurate. Mia moved uneasily in her seat, her face pallid. I carried on, opening a folder loaded with proof. She confirmed that Mia had been found cheating with her boyfriend when I told her I had talked with Meg, who threw the party a year ago. This was a behavior trend, not a one-time error. I turned over a written statement Meg sent. Mia's parents and I looked at it, their expressions changing from uncertainty to shock. Still, that was only one thing. I also brought out more proof. Text exchanges between Mia and Meg in which Mia admitted to cheating and pleaded with Meg not to tell Tom. These timestamped signals were unambiguous and devoid of uncertainty. On the table I arranged the printed messages. Though this time it appeared more toward Mia than it did me, my mother gasped and my father's face became red with rage. At last, I turned to Tom and said in a letter, he spoke about how he approached Mia following our talk and how she finally admitted. He also detailed the emotional toll her adultery took on him and how it affected his choice not to pop the question. My parents found no words. Unable to dispute the overwhelming proof, they fixated on the paperwork before them. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she said nothing, clearly understanding the seriousness of the matter. I then addressed the lawsuit. Although my parents had threatened to sue me for emotional suffering and slander, based on the facts it was abundantly evident that what I had said was accurate. They lacked legal justification for their posture. Actually, if they went after this, I had a strong case for a counterclaim. The space was quiet. Clearly surprised and adjusting to the reality of the circumstances were my parents and Mia. Knowing that I had at last advocated for myself, I felt relief. For the last time, I told Mia I did this because it was the proper thing to do, not out of spite or jealousy. Mia had consequences for her actions. It was time for her to own them. Regarding my wedding, my message was straightforward. Either with or without their approval, everything was going forward as scheduled. We wouldn't allow someone to destroy our happiness. Jake and I would be getting married. Rising to indicate that the session was over, I hoped this would be a turning point for all of us. That brought me closure and I left the room. Though I am aware that difficulties lie ahead, I feel for the first time in a long time under charge of my own life. Although my parents and Mia can proceed with their case, now they know I will be squarely facing them and there is no good outcome for either of us. The encouragement of our friends and relatives keeps Jake and I forging ahead with our new life. Though the road to recovery with my sister and family will be long and challenging, we are ready to travel it together. Eventually, defending myself and acting morally offered a sense of tranquility I had been lacking for so long. Looking ahead, Jake and I know we are stronger since we confronted these obstacles squarely. Without the recommendations and encouragement in the comments, this would not have been feasible. All of you and your tales have taught me so much. Thank you. Then farewell. Dad favored my sister but was rejected. I chose my brother to walk me down the aisle and witnessed karma hit him hard. Dad wanted to take my sister down the aisle first, but she chose our stepdad, so he declined to walk me down the aisle. Dad is crying now and pleading with me to let him. Although I've never been a particularly vindictive person, I do enjoy it when karma is presented in a palpable manner, which is what has occurred. I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a lousy daughter. I couldn't be happier or more arrogant about the whole thing. After years and years of pain and emotional abuse, I am overjoyed to have finally seen justice. My father has made me feel awful as I've grown up. He suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place, now that he has no one else to rely on. Out of my 3 siblings, I, F31, am the middle one. Sarah, F29, is my younger sister, and Finley, Finn, M37, is my older brother. We were a happy family for the majority of my upbringing. At least my mom, F59, did her best to be an equal parent, even though my parents had their preferences. My father, M65, is not in the same boat. Favoritism was clearly visible in his actions. His favorite person was Sarah, and since Finn was the son, he naturally felt a connection with him and they could bond over man things. I was, of course, left out of this dynamic. It began at a very young age. I've always had the impression that my father didn't think highly of me. I made a few attempts to express it, maybe by throwing fits because I was a challenging kid overall, but nothing I ever did got his attention. As I grew older, I came to terms with it. I believe Mom tried to make up for his partiality after noticing it. Because I would have remained invisible my entire life if it had been up to my father, I have always adored her for seeing me. Mom did her best to be an equitable parent, but as I mentioned, she was not flawless. She treated us the same and loved us equally. I believe Finn noticed that she made an effort to keep me from feeling excluded. He attempted to fill in after noticing my neglect and my tendency to be distant. When Finn was learning how to change automobile tires, he would ask Dad if I could come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, he made sure I was present. Dad didn't involve me in the chats, so I know it was him. I didn't experience abuse or anything similar. We received similar gifts if they gave them to us. For example, I received as many new outfits as either Sarah or Finn. However, Dad never provided me with any emotional support. Mom and Finn attempted to fill that void in my life for all that time. Sarah, on the other hand, simply enjoyed playing the role of the young princess. She was a snobby child, and her attitude caused her school to raise various concerns. In some way, all of those worries were ignored. She developed into a very demanding and conceited young lady. I am not really close to her as a result. I'm really close to Finn, and he simply can't bear Sarah. Dad is the only one who does not find her behavior problematic. Mom barely puts up with her either. This is the current situation. Mom and Dad split about a decade ago. We have all been kept in the dark about the true reason for the friendly breakup. We all know that Mom and Dad's claim that they are no longer compatible is untrue. Something else is the true cause. Since none of them began dating someone new for a long period after the divorce, I am very sure it wasn't infidelity. We all still don't know the truth, and Mom and Dad have always wanted to keep it that way. There was no custody issue to deal with because we were all adults at the time. Since then, they've generally gotten along well. Since, let's face it, there's no love lost there, I have personally opted to avoid seeing Dad as much as possible. I suppose it works for both of us because he hasn't voiced any complaints about my absence. When I have free time, I usually visit Mom's house, although Finn and Sarah split their time equally between the 2 locations. We never go with Sarah unless it's for Christmas, but Finn and I occasionally plan our trips to Mom's house. Finn simply cannot tolerate her. When viewed from the outside, we appear to be rather normal and functional. But for once, I am glad that things have taken a turn for the worse. Mom began dating Arthur, M60, 5 years ago. They clicked right away after meeting at a yoga retreat. My time with Arthur is enjoyable, and he is a cool guy. He never tries to push limits and is kind to Finn and myself. Since nobody has ever mentioned it and I don't see any justification for him to treat Sarah badly, I'm going to presume that everything is well between them. All that matters is that Mom is happy. Even though Dad is very combative with Arthur, they have a friendly relationship. I believe it's because Dad doesn't have a steady partner and his dating life hasn't been very successful. In addition, Mom's life is opulent in comparison to her life with Dad, and Arthur makes a lot more money than Dad does. We are all pleased for Mom, but I believe Dad is really resentful of the whole thing. The fact that we get along well with Arthur is another thing he dislikes. Dad still acts envious despite Finn's attempts to explain that none of us are taking his place and that we are simply acting like responsible adults in this scenario. All of it is very offensive and childish. Fortunately, since I don't see Dad very often, I don't have to deal with a lot of it. The dynamics of the family are as follows at the moment. Understanding the backdrop is crucial to comprehending the events of the past few days. My fiancée, Kieran, M34, proposed to me a few months ago. We've spent a lot of time together. I prefer to stay private, therefore I didn't make the engagement public right away. After choosing the date, Kieran and I informed our families since we wanted to get married as soon as possible and avoid a lengthy engagement period. 1 week from now, the wedding is planned. My family's response when I told them was conflicted. Arthur was pleased, and Finn and Mom were ecstatic. Sarah appeared pretty unhappy, but Dad's response was fairly neutral. All of this took place during a video call, and I could see that she quickly ended the call after forcing a grin. She detests not being the center of attention, so I was expecting some sort of tantrum, but at that moment, I couldn't stand her theatrics. I informed Finn that I wanted him to be the one to escort me down the aisle, not Dad, and I called him separately to gossip. He remained silent for a time and claimed that although he was deeply moved by my request, he believed it was improper to fulfill and that Dad would make a big deal out of it. He claimed that although he would really like to, he was unable to do so since he didn't want to annoy his father. He said something that hurt me. He understood that I needed him to be there with me since he had been my male protector far more than Dad, and I informed him that I had come to him because I had been let down by Dad on multiple occasions. I hate to say it, but I also felt Finn was making sense, so I didn't argue with him about it. It was an emotional conversation. Gently, he assured me that it didn't matter if he escorted me down the aisle. It was crucial that my day be as uneventful as possible so that I could look back on it with joy and no resentment. If he were to assume Dad's position, he claimed, Dad would remain agitated during the ceremony and spoil the day and the memories for me. He was correct. I knew what Finn said would make my day simpler, if not perfect, and Dad was more than capable of pulling off such a ruse. Finn advised me to discuss it with Dad. I stated I would give it some thought and that I was hesitant to have him escort me down the aisle. Fortunately, Sarah and her boyfriend Zach announced their engagement 2 weeks later. After exchanging glances with Kieran, I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else, but I couldn't help myself. Finn was also not very pleased. We were both aware of the timing, but we were unable to change it, so we kept quiet. One positive outcome of this is that Sarah's wedding is scheduled for approximately 5 weeks from now, 1 month after mine. The stars didn't align in her favor, so she had to be content to be the second bride in the family, even though she had really wanted to marry before me. I resisted her attempts to guilt me into delaying my wedding, even though she was rather sour about it. She needed to grow up since I wasn't the type to give in to her whims. Thus, things remained unchanged. But it seems that Dad and Sarah agreed that he would accompany her down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not really sure how they came up with something that strange. Since I never had much luck with boys in school or college, I suppose they figured I wouldn't get married or would get married later. In any case, once Sarah announced her engagement, I requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle. He sadly informed me that he had promised his baby that he would accompany her first. Years ago, while she was on her deathbed, which never materialized, he said he had made that commitment. Now, he wouldn't be able to lead me down the aisle because he couldn't break his word and break her heart. To be honest, I was thrilled because I didn't want him to accompany me down the aisle in the first place. I was dancing within as I feigned sadness and hurt. I assured him that even if it hurt, it didn't, I would accept his vow to Sarah because I respected it. I called Finn right away and informed him of the situation. He was upset with his father. Finn stated that he would have seized the chance to accompany me down the aisle immediately if he had known Dad would act in this manner. He said that I could choose whatever daughter I wanted to grant this privilege to if Dad could. I was too delighted to care if Finn was upset with Dad. In the end, it had turned out to be just what I had desired, and I am overjoyed. Despite the pressure of wedding planning, everything was going smoothly. Up until yesterday, when unheard of drama entered my life, drama for which I lacked the stamina, everything looked to be in order, despite my jitteriness and nervousness. Sarah told her father last night that he would not be accompanying her to the wedding. She requested Arthur to do it instead. We were all surprised by this. Not only that, she announced it via video call. She could have been more tactful about it, and it was cruel. We were all aware of Dad's excitement for her wedding. Because she and her fiancé wanted to save money for the honeymoon, he had even covered the entire cost. Dad had nearly mentally checked out of my life, and Mom and Dad were busy organizing 2 weddings. Since all of his attention was on Sarah, he had nothing to contribute or recommend and continued to show no interest in anything pertaining to my wedding. Furthermore, he had not made any financial contributions to my wedding. We were paying for it ourselves, Kieran and I. It had gotten to the point where I was depending more on Mom and Arthur's advice than on Dad's. In contrast to Sarah, Arthur was actively involved in my wedding preparations. Because of this, even Arthur appeared surprised by Sarah's request, or rather, her demand, and was unsure of how to react. When Mom finally stated that Arthur would love to do it, he continued to stare at her. I work in corporate, where terrible calls are almost a given, but that had to be one of the worst calls I've ever been on. Dad was crying. He began cursing out Arthur instead of discussing it with Sarah, and then hung up. And that was all. I didn't ask Dad how he was feeling, but I'm sure the others did. I quickly hung up the phone since I had too many other things to think about. Besides, this wasn't my problem. He didn't want to renege on the commitment he had made to Sarah. It was between them if she broke it. I didn't want or intend to step in. They were able to resolve it among themselves. I wasn't interested in becoming involved in trivial family matters at this time. I had no idea that it would soon cause me great annoyance. A few hours after his little princess dealt him a heartbreaking blow, Dad called me last night in tears. On the phone, he was crying and telling me that he would love to walk me down the aisle now and that he was foolish for turning down my offer. I was shocked by what I heard. It was astonishing how entitled they were. Although I was sorry for what had transpired, I gently explained to him that it was between him and Sarah. It had no bearing whatsoever on my wedding plans. I informed him that this had been decided months prior and that Finn was escorting me down the aisle. I also informed him that I was unable to make a last-minute modification. He promised to speak with Finn, saying that I didn't need to be concerned about Finn's disagreement because Finn was merely a placeholder for him. I explained to him that I didn't want to hurt Finn, not that he agreed. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my father in the first place. I informed Dad that no swap was taking place, despite his insistence that he speak with Finn and make amends. The final step was for Finn to lead me down the aisle. He believed I was resisting because Finn wouldn't resign, and he was living in total denial. He was sure he could persuade Finn not to do it. After hanging up, I called Finn right away to let him know what was happening. It would be an understatement to say that Finn was furious. I informed him that I had always wanted him to be the one to reveal my identity when he asked what I wanted. Only at his encouragement did I ask Dad in the first place, and he was the first person I had asked. I replied in the affirmative when Finn asked if I was certain I wanted him to lead me down the aisle. Then he assured me that if Dad phoned him, he would correct him and that I shouldn't worry about anything. Since his favorite had sent him out, I told Finn that I didn't want any drama at the wedding and that Dad needed to realize that he couldn't just walk in anytime he wanted and use me as a stand-in daughter. Finn reassured me that there would be no alteration to the wedding arrangements and that he would make sure Dad knew about it. I haven't spoken to one of them since last evening. I'm getting so anxious about it. I truly don't have the energy to handle this turmoil at this time, and everything was going smoothly. I'm not sure if I should get in touch with them or hold off until I find out what transpired between Finn and Dad. I'm not even sure whether Finn has had a conversation with him yet. The anxiousness is making me queasy, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Update 1. Finn and I eventually spoke, and the situation is a complete mess, even worse than I had anticipated. Fortunately, he has taken care of the majority of it, so I won't have any issues. Finn claimed that he had been expecting a call from Dad to talk about the alleged change in plans, but the call never arrived. Finn recognized then that Dad was not going to talk about anything. Dad reasoned that since he had made the decision to accompany me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed. After waiting a day for Dad to get in touch, Finn called him. Because I had mentioned something, he asked Dad if the arrangements had changed. In an attempt to appear casual, Dad said that because Sarah would no longer be walking me down the aisle, I had requested him to do so. Now, Finn, the more reasonable and level-headed of the three of us, is typically diplomatic. I was shocked to hear that he went completely crazy on Dad. Finn claimed that since they both knew I hadn't requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle, he urged him to stop being so rude. Rather, Dad had pleaded for the part after his beloved daughter had turned him down. Dad was enraged to hear this. When faced with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear, he has a tendency to react violently. Finn, however, told Dad to stop talking and listen for once before he could interfere. Finn stated that considering how he had treated me over the years, Dad should be thankful that he was even receiving an invitation to my wedding. Then Finn relaxed. He later expressed regret to me for snapping at Dad, particularly so near the wedding, but he said he was unable to control himself. Finn longed for Dad to see his true self and shed the mask he was wearing. Finn admitted to Dad that he had always given preference to Sarah and had, at most, tried to get along with Finn, but I was never given any thought. In addition, he brought up the fact that I had requested Finn to accompany me down the aisle. I had only asked Dad at first because of Finn's persistence. Finn stated that he had thought Dad would use the occasion to begin repairing our relationship, but Dad squandered his opportunity. Finn said that none of his kids liked or respected Dad, calling him a failure of a father. Because Finn wasn't a fair parent, he didn't respect him. He never made an effort to love me or treat me like his daughter, therefore I didn't respect him. Sarah also didn't respect him since she wouldn't have pulled the prank she did if she did. Finn went on to claim that Dad was the source of Sarah's conceited demeanor. After years of lavishing her with attention, he was now having to deal with the fallout. Finn claimed that since Dad had been throwing out his other children since they were born, it was only fitting that his favorite child would throw out his favorite. Finn told me that although he didn't remember everything because he had shouted in a blinding passion, he did admit that he had spoken more. He reassured me that I didn't have to be concerned about Dad pulling any tricks after he got a harsh reality check. And Finn would take care of it right away if he did. Finn also clarified that the plans remained unchanged. He wouldn't alter the fact that he would be the one to lead me down the aisle. I was more than grateful that he apologized for the drama so close to the wedding. I've never been able to defend myself with such strength in my life. I always believed that I might have done something wrong for Dad to not love me. Over the years, I made an effort to get over that emotion, but I was never successful. Here I had my brother standing up for me, which I never thought anyone would do. When we were children, my mother ought to have defended me, but she didn't. She never challenged Dad, but she made an effort to compensate for the lack of affection in her own manner. Her diffidence and deference to him gave me the impression that I would never be able to confront him about how awful he was to me, though I don't blame her for it. But only because my brother loved me so much that he could no longer stand the idea of my going through this did that change. I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me, and I was crying by the time he finished recounting the entire episode. It must be the greatest thing I could ever hope for, but I doubt Finn understands the extent of what he has done. Second update, I'm married now. In fact, Kieran and I are presently enjoying our honeymoon in Thailand after getting married a few days ago. Despite some turmoil beforehand, the wedding went off without a hitch. Dad couldn't walk even one daughter down the aisle, and Finn wasn't going to back down. The situation has become really bad. Dad was primarily worried about how his extended family would perceive him if he did not attend the weddings of both children. During his conversation with Finn, he kept returning to this subject. Once more, Finn bluntly informed him that he was emotionally checked out with me anyway, thus he was missing the role of father at least for my wedding. Finn advised him to express gratitude for the invitation in the first place. Since Sarah was his favorite, Dad could only wonder what went wrong with her, and no one truly knows why she did what she did. When word came out, Sarah had the gall to phone me and claim that it was unjust to Dad and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle because she couldn't. Since she was using Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had expelled him, I encouraged her to have a life. I informed her that I had visited Dad and that, due to some foolish pledge she was unable to keep, he had decided to accompany her down the aisle. She was more than welcome to change things up at her wedding if she was so offended by her beloved father's misery. Since she was feeling awful about Dad, I assured her that Arthur would understand and that I could even speak with him on her behalf. She ended the call since she had nothing more to say. Before the wedding, I called Finn and informed him that I didn't want to be involved in any more father drama. If it came to me, it was his duty to make sure I was finished with this bullshit. I couldn't allow Dad to ruin my day because I had 100 other things to be happy about or worried about. I couldn't allow him to ruin my most memorable day because he had already made me miserable for most of my life. Finn assured me that he would handle everything and that I shouldn't worry. It would be an understatement to say that I was really anxious on my wedding day, but fortunately, everything went smoothly. I'm glad Dad didn't try to start anything, even though he appeared to be rather glum. After a point, I was too preoccupied with having fun to give his pouty face much thought. It was awkward between them, and Sarah tried to avoid Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. I'm happy that nobody was able to ruin the wedding because it went off without a hitch. I could feel Dad glaring daggers at my back as Finn led me down the aisle, but that was all he could do. According to what I've been informed, Dad has been left to handle some damage control after a few people questioned why Finn was up there instead of him. That's his cross to carry, then. In order to live a peaceful existence and eliminate any possibility of turmoil, I also want Sarah's wedding to be over. I'm going to cut off communication with Dad for the foreseeable future after her wedding. In any case, I don't see the need to keep in contact with him. Update 2. Yesterday was Sarah's wedding. She didn't ask Kieran and me to the wedding, so I wouldn't know how it went. I'm not sure what she was trying to accomplish, but I was more than willing to watch. It was just Mom, Arthur, and Dad there, and to her dismay, Finn did not go either. At the last minute, Dad reportedly hoped she would change her mind and ask him to lead her down the aisle, but that never occurred. It was quite unpleasant, and it's clear from the pictures she shared that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is just finished, Dad is glum, and Arthur is uneasy. I don't really care, but aside from that, her wedding went smoothly. I was called up by Mom to provide these details. Naturally, Dad is unhappy because he had hoped that at least one of us would give in and allow him to do as he pleases. Now, however, his personal life is in disarray and all of his children are essentially cut off from him. I don't care that he isn't handling it well. For being such a bad father to me, allowing me to have a miserable childhood, and even helping to cause it, I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they're no longer in my life. My parents kicked me out because of my sister. 6 years later, they're asking for help to support her and her 4 young children. I, 32F, am currently in charge of significant commercial development projects around New England as a successful architect at a prominent Boston firm. Nathan, a 34-year-old man who works as a project manager in sustainable development, is my fiancé. Our wedding is scheduled for the following year. On the surface, my life appears to be ideal. I have rewarding work, a wonderful relationship, and a lovely craftsman-style home that I designed extensive modifications for. However, I'm questioning everything because of a complex family situation that recently reached a breaking point. I must go into great depth about my family history in order for you to comprehend the current circumstance. I was raised in a Connecticut suburb in an upper-middle-class household. My mother, Phoebe, 56F, taught high school at a private school until she left 6 years ago, and my father, Richard, 58M, works as a corporate lawyer at a reputable business. Ashley, my younger sister, who is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, has always been the star of our family. Favoritism was evident from my earliest recollections, even if my parents would strongly dispute it if questioned. I received consecutive A's on my report card when I was 8 and Ashley was 6, and I was simply informed, "That's expected of you?" While Ashley received B's and was commended and brought out for ice cream because she was trying her best. Throughout our childhood, this trend persisted. Ashley's meager efforts were widely praised, while my accomplishments were anticipated and frequently disregarded. When I was 15, I recall one specific occurrence. I had been working on my design project for months, frequently staying up until 2 in the morning, in preparation for a national high school architectural competition. I received a minor scholarship as a result of placing second nationally. Ashley had an ordinary soccer match that day, so my parents didn't even make it to the award ceremony. "That's nice," they replied, barely taking their eyes off the TV as I brought my award home, before turning back to Ashley's dramatic account of how she nearly scored a goal. Even though my parents were clearly biased, I did well in school and in my personal life. I led multiple community service projects, kept a 4.0 GPA, and served as president of the student body. In the meantime, as Ashley approached adolescence, her actions became more alarming. When she began to slip out when I was 14, my parents told me to keep a better eye on her. She was caught stealing high-end makeup when she was 15, and they accused me of not providing her my allowance money even though she clearly needed it. The assumption that I should put Ashley's needs and interests ahead of my own was the most annoying aspect, not only the partiality. My part-time job at a local design firm, where I made coffee and filed papers, allowed me to save up $3,000 when I was 16. I intended to use it for a Columbia University summer architecture course. My parents, however, borrowed my cash to assist cover the repairs after Ashley, who wasn't supposed to be driving, smashed her boyfriend's car. They never fulfilled their commitment to reimburse me. I lost the chance to improve my college applications and the summer program opportunity. I was able to gain admission to a prominent architectural program in spite of these obstacles. In order to save money, my parents agreed to let me live at home while I was in college and to assist with my tuition. They wanted me around to assist handle Ashley, who was now in high school and becoming more disobedient by the day, so this wasn't totally selfless. I recall making several attempts to speak with Ashley about her actions. One exchange is particularly memorable. 3 months or so passed before everything collapsed. At 3 in the morning on a school night, I discovered her slinking back into the house. Assisting Ashley to climb through the window, I whispered, "Ashley, you need to be more careful. You're in your senior year, and colleges look at more than just grades." She retorted, "Stop trying to be mom. Just because your life is boring and all about buildings doesn't mean mine has to be." In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. Ashley spent a lot of time with Tyler, her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, who was known for being trouble. My parents viewed everyone I dated with extreme mistrust, yet they were surprisingly lenient about their relationship. My mother accused me of being envious of Ashley's vibrant social life when I attempted to voice my concerns about Tyler. 6 years ago, everything drastically altered. One day, Ashley, a senior in high school at the time, came home and declared she was expecting a child. The father was Tyler. I can still clearly recall that night. Ashley sitting on the couch with a look of fear and defiance on her face, my father pacing the living room, and my mother sobbing uncontrollably. In the confusion that ensued, my parents somehow twisted the facts to accuse me of failing to keep a closer eye on her. My mother arrived in my room the following day with news that would forever alter my course in life. Without even looking at him, she stated, "You have to move out by the end of the week." I couldn't understand. What? Why? With Tyler moving in and a baby on the way, the house isn't large enough for all of us. Ashley needs your space. One approach to support your sister at this trying period would be to move out. I made an effort to reason with her. During my third year of college, I worked part-time at a nearby architecture business and maintained a 3.9 GPA. She insisted on finding me a cheap apartment close to university, even though I just requested for a few months. The worst thing was when my father summoned me to his home office the next day. He delivered another hit while seated behind his enormous oak desk, which he had always used to frighten clients. "We won't be able to continue paying your tuition," he stated in a cold, clinical tone. "That money is necessary for Ashley and the child. You'll figure something out since you're intelligent." I stood there looking at the man who had always emphasized the value of education and accountability, suddenly severing his daughter's ties after she had done everything correctly. The irony hurt. I packed my things that evening. My father stopped me in the driveway as I was packing the final box into my car. I briefly believed that he might reconsider. Rather, he gave me a piece of paper with a list of local women's shelters on it. He said, "Just in case," and went back inside. The next phase of my life was the darkest. For 4 months, I lived in my car and, for safety, parked every night in a different Walmart lot. In the architecture firm where I worked part-time, I would change in public toilets, take a shower in the campus gym, and keep my business attire in my locker. I took a second job working as a late-night barista, frequently juggling multiple jobs while attending classes. I asked a few family members for assistance, but they all turned me down. My 53-year-old Aunt Susan, who had always expressed her pride in my accomplishments, informed me that she didn't want to become embroiled in family strife. According to my grandparents, they were too old to handle the matter. I occasionally went days without eating a decent meal, barely making it on protein bars and coffee. I frequently slept off at my desk while working on my homework in the college library, which was open 24 hours a day. I kept my GPA the same in spite of everything. My escape was architecture. I put all of my suffering and willpower into my designs. My parents never once called to see whether I was still alive during this time. Ashley didn't either. After learning that she had given birth to a boy, I made one phone call, but it was awkward and short. After that, there was no communication for 6 years. I had to start over in my life throughout those 6 years. Despite working 60-hour weeks and living in my car and then a small room in a dubious area of town, I finished with honors. A famous Boston business was interested in my final thesis project, which was a design for a sustainable community center with transitional housing that received multiple prizes. Living in a small studio apartment and trying to save as much money as I could, I began my career as an entry-level architect. Every advancement was a triumph over my past. I was managing my own projects for 4 years. My area of expertise was sustainable commercial development, and I gained recognition for my creative ideas that put the needs of people and the environment first. 3 years ago, Nathan and I met at a seminar on sustainable development. During the Q&A portion of his presentation on green construction projects, I disputed one of his claims. He invited me to continue the conversation over coffee rather than becoming defensive. Dinner evolved from that coffee into the most wholesome and encouraging relationship I've ever experienced. Nathan is well aware of my background. He was present when I purchased my first home after getting expelled. When I signed the paperwork and broke down because I was so overcome by the fact that I finally had a place where no one could make me leave, he held me. He supported my idea to refurbish it and make it an environment that reflected all of my accomplishments over the years. Through mutual contacts, I occasionally learned tidbits about Ashley's life. Shortly after the birth of their baby, she wed Tyler, but the two of them split up after 6 months. By that time, she was expecting her second kid, but the father had entirely vanished after learning of the pregnancy. She had another kid with Marcus, the man she married 2 years later, but their marriage failed when she had an affair. She is now pregnant once more and doesn't seem to know who the father is. I got a call yesterday from an unidentified number right before bed. After 6 years of stillness, my mother called. She initially pretended nothing had happened, inquiring about my life and showing interest in my accomplishments. I briefly felt like that young child again, excited to tell my mother about my achievements. I even began to tell her about my recent promotion to senior architect and my engagement. Then she revealed the true reason she had called. In order to assist Ashley and her kids, my parents want me to return to Connecticut. They say they're too old to care for 4 small children, and my father will shortly be retiring. They even had the gall to claim that, as the successful sister, it is my duty to support the family. My mother said, "You've always been the responsible one," with that cunning tone I so vividly remembered in her voice. Now more than ever, Ashley needs her big sister. Family must remain united. A chilly chuckle erupted within me. Family have to stick together? I said it again. When I was sleeping in my car, where was this family? When I was barely eating and working 2 jobs? When there was nobody for me to turn to? I went on despite my mother's attempt to stop me. "You absolutely abandoned me, kicked me out, and stopped paying for my schooling in order to help Ashley. You expect me to sacrifice my life, career, and relationship in order to clean up your mess once more now that she has continued to make bad decisions and you're sick of dealing with the fallout?" I hung up after telling her that I would never again risk my life for Ashley. Since then, family members who turned down my request for assistance 6 years ago have been bombarding my phone with messages accusing me of being callous and asserting that family helps family. Nathan completely agrees with my decision to uphold my boundaries, but other people argue that since they are still family and retaliation won't mend old hurts, I should at least have a meeting with them. But this doesn't seem like vindictiveness to me. I saw it as defending the life I created on my own, after being deserted by those who were meant to keep me safe. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their tremendous support and wisdom. My phone has been buzzing nonstop with messages from extended family members for the past 48 hours, which has been very taxing. The circumstances have changed in unexpected ways. My mother wrote me a long email detailing Ashley's children's daily problems, along with comprehensive pictures of my nieces and nephews. The oldest, who is currently in kindergarten, is exhibiting early behavioral problems. The second child's health issues necessitate regular medical care. Another is on the way, while the third is still a toddler. A communication from an old family friend who teaches at Ashley's old high school was what really got to me. She informed me that in order to pay for Ashley's costs and medical bills, my parents have been taking out loans. My father has delayed his retirement indefinitely, and they have already remortgaged their home. Ashley personally sent a direct message, which was the most unexpected development. She reached out for the first time in 6 years, not to apologize but to let her big sister know that she had changed and needed her. She talked about acknowledging her past sins and is attending therapy. Although I've seen this pattern before, I still have a part of me that wants to believe her. In order to keep both physical and emotional distance from the family, my fiancé Nathan proposed a compromise, providing financial support for the kids' schooling through a trust fund. It's an intriguing idea that would enable me to assist the defenseless kids without being embroiled in the family strife. All of this is still registering in my mind. Seeing those pictures of the children, who are innocent in all of this, has made me feel conflicted, even though my logical side knows I owe them nothing. When I make a choice about Nathan's suggestion, I'll provide another update. I need some time right now to process everything without having to deal with family pressure all the time. Update 2. Over the last 24 hours, everything has drastically changed. My mother called me in an emergency last night. Ashley had been involved in a severe vehicle accident. Another automobile ran a red light and collided with her car while she was driving alone. The situation was dire because she was pregnant. I got into my car and drove to Connecticut for 4 hours without giving it any thought. It felt unreal to enter that hospital. As he paced the corridor in his faded suit, my father appeared to be much older than his years. When she saw me, my mother lost it all. I hadn't actually seen them in person for 6 years. Although Ashley's injuries were not life-threatening because of the airbags, the doctors added, they had to perform an emergency C-section in order to save the baby. With a questionable prognosis, the premature baby is currently in the NICU. My biggest surprise was going back to the house I grew up in. I grudgingly complied with my parents' request that I remain rather than book a hotel. Entering my former room felt like entering a time portal. My old desk was still in its original condition, my architecture designs were still attached to the walls, and even my high school trophies were still neatly arranged. Everything was just as I had left it 6 years prior. Then it dawned on me that they hadn't actually converted my room into an area for Ashley. The whole needing the room pretext had been nothing more than a pretext. Another unanticipated emotional moment was meeting my nieces and nephews. I was astonished to hear Charlie, 6 million, the oldest, say, "Aunt Rebecca, I know you from the pictures." My parents had apparently informed them about their aunt, who construct stunning structures, in spite of everything. After I assisted them in building a block tower, the smaller ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, who had been timid at first, quickly warmed up. After 3 days here, I'm learning new things that make my emotions even more complicated. I discovered a stack of unsent letters from my father while searching through some old documents for Ashley's insurance information. They were letters of apologies that he never mailed, all addressed to me and dated throughout the previous 6 years. Tears appeared to have soiled several of them. Yesterday, Nathan flew in to help me get through this. I became aware of how much these children deserve to be free from the chaos they were born into as I watched him engage with my nieces and nephew, using play to teach them basic engineering concepts. Ashley is still in and out of consciousness, but she is stable presently. The baby's condition is still dire. Although I've taken an emergency leave of absence, I have some important project deadlines to attend to in Boston next week. How I feel about things is still a mystery to me. My fury is still there, but it's mixed up with other feelings I can't quite put my finger on. The youngsters who somehow know about me, the preserved chamber, and the unsent letters are all making me rethink how I perceive the previous 6 years. I have to return to the hospital right now to get an update on the baby's health. Next week, when I return to Boston, I will write more. I'm just attempting to live day by day for the time being. Update 3. After spending another week in Connecticut, this time with Nathan, I just got back to Boston. It was a complex experience. Ashley asked me to invite him expressly because she wanted to meet the person who makes her sister happy. The dynamics were revealing and unpleasant. I made a startling discovery while we were there. I discovered years' worth of Ashley's treatment records while assisting my mother with organizing some medical paperwork. My parents never disclosed to me that she had been dealing with bipolar disorder since she was in her teens. Manic episodes occurred at the same time as the numerous pregnancies and relationship problems. This information adds another level of complexity to the process, but it does not justify the way they treated me. The most pivotal event occurred when I spoke with Ashley privately in her hospital room. She was more lucid than I had seen her in years, most likely as a result of taking her medications as prescribed following the accident. She acknowledged that, even in high school, she had envied my success and security. "You made everything look so easy," she stated. And I felt like the family disappointment in comparison. Neither of us missed the irony. Nathan's presence proved to be quite important. I was too deeply invested to notice what he saw. One evening at supper, he pointed out that my father was unable to look me in the eye, displaying signals of intense embarrassment instead of the apathy I had always imagined. Additionally, he saw my mother's tense tendency to begin statements and then stop them quickly, seemingly out of fear of saying the wrong thing. The children now play a big role in my emotional equation. Charlie, 6 million, my oldest nephew, showed me his architectural drawings, which were sloppy but sincere attempts to replicate images of my work that my parents must have shown him. When the younger ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, begin referring to Nathan as uncle, it has a deeper impact on him than he anticipated. The infant will need to remain in the NICU for at least another month, although her condition has stabilized. My parents have been sleeping in the waiting area on shifts, refusing to leave their grandchildren alone, according to a nurse who spoke to us during one of our hospital stays. They appear emotionally and physically worn out. I've made some sensible choices. A family therapist with expertise in intergenerational trauma is what I'm setting up. I've also discussed working remotely for a few days every month with my company. I haven't changed my mind about returning to Connecticut though. I now live and work in Boston. On the way back to Boston, Nathan and I had a lengthy conversation. His statement, "Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for still caring," really resonated with me. I've been feeling bad about not being able to control my rage in its purest, protective form, so this really spoke to me. I have a crucial client meeting tomorrow, so I must concentrate. Strangely, at the moment, routine work duties feel both anchoring and inconsequential. After our first family therapy appointment, which is set for next week, I'll provide another update. Update 4, something important happened during my parents' trip to Boston last weekend, so I had to write this update. You read correctly. They traveled to Boston ostensibly to talk about important issues pertaining to the family situation. I initially consented to meet them in a neutral setting, a peaceful cafe close to the public garden. But they persisted in touring my residence because they claimed to be interested in learning more about my life. I reluctantly consented after speaking with Nathan and establishing explicit guidelines on the length of their stay. It was surprising how they responded to my house. Normally stoic, my father broke down when he saw my architecture awards in my home office. However, their true purpose caught me completely off guard. They produced paperwork that demonstrated they had been covertly putting money aside for me ever since they expelled me. I've never witnessed my father sobbing so much in my life. He clarified that for 6 years, they had established a different savings account and contributed the amount equal to my college tuition each month. It has grown to a significant amount with interest. Their justification? They intended to leave it in their will because they were too embarrassed to deal with me personally. A fierce confrontation resulted from this revelation. I let out years' worth of suppressed rage because I could no longer contain it. "Do you think money can fix what you did?" I yelled. "I lived in my vehicle. I didn't eat. I tried to keep up my grades by working till I was worn out." My father then made a statement that really stopped me cold. "We don't expect forgiveness," he stated. "We just want you to know that your suffering has haunted us every single day." He then showed me his diary, which detailed all of my accomplishments that he had followed over the years via social media and professional networks. He mentioned my advancements, my first significant project, and even the Sustainable Design Prize I received the previous year. After sobbing quietly, my mother finally opened out about Ashley's past mental health issues. Evidently, they had observed similar behavioral tendencies in Ashley's early years but disregarded the warning signs in favor of managing me as the stable child. She acknowledged that their parenting style had been completely incorrect. When they mentioned their most recent worries, the topic of conversation changed. They disclosed that Marcus, Ashley's ex-husband, is attempting to obtain full custody of their child by using the accident and Ashley's history of mental illness. Just as she is beginning to stabilize with her new medicine regimen, they are concerned that this could lead to another breakdown. This is when the situation becomes complex. I'm no longer being asked to relocate back. Rather, they are asking me to assist them in locating a reputable mental health center in Boston for Ashley and the child after she is discharged from the NICU. In order to assist with the other children while Ashley receives the care she needs, they wish to sell their Connecticut home and relocate closer. Nathan, who remained close by to provide assistance if necessary, subsequently made a significant observation. They're finally acknowledging their mistakes and trying to find actual solutions instead of just dumping responsibilities on you. I'm still taking it all in. Although the money they save doesn't change the past, their persistent covert efforts at making amends reveal a level of regret I hadn't previously thought of. My father's journal seems like a heartbreaking reminder of what might have been, a father who was proud of his daughter's accomplishments but was too embarrassed to say so out loud. To learn more about Ashley's custody dispute and what part, if any, I should play in it, I'm meeting with a family law lawyer tomorrow. Additionally, I'm looking into psychiatric hospitals that focus in postpartum mental health treatment. Regarding my assistance with Ashley's treatment plans, I have not responded to them. Although I have a strong desire to uphold rigid limits, I also acknowledge that this could be an opportunity for genuine, structural change in our family's dynamic. This time, with the right boundaries and expert assistance, things could be different. Once I've decided how I want to participate in these new developments, I'll provide another update. Update 5. I've made some decisions regarding my relationship with my family going forward after giving it a lot of thought and attending multiple family therapy sessions. Initially, in response to my parents' inquiry concerning Ashley's care, I assisted them in locating a respectable mental health and postpartum care center in Boston. I did, however, clarify that my participation would be strictly limited and professional. Although I will not be personally involved in Ashley's daily care, I was able to connect them with the resources they needed through my professional network. My parents' savings account has been transformed into a trust fund, of which I am the trustee, for Ashley's children's education. This arrangement guarantees that the funds will be utilized suitably while upholding professional boundaries. Nathan used his financial planning and contacts to assist put things up. I never imagined how my relationship with my family would change over time. I've developed a methodical approach to keeping in touch that safeguards my personal well-being, even if I won't be returning to Connecticut or taking on any caregiving duties. We've decided to continue family therapy sessions and have frequent video chats with the kids, with Ashley being contacted directly only in case of emergencies. Even though my mother still calls a lot, I've seen a big shift in the way she handles things. She no longer makes demands or guilt trips before providing family information, and she respects my limits when I tell her that I'm too busy to talk. My father made the most unexpected revelation. In addition to sending me a formal written apology outlining particular occasions in which he failed me as a father, he began visiting his own therapist. Instead of the cliched, "I'm sorry for everything," I had anticipated, I received a considerate acknowledgement of particular negative behaviors and how they affected my life. After being admitted to the treatment center, Ashley is beginning to show recovery. At last, the infant is well and no longer in the NICU. I've made arrangements for a child psychologist to work with her older children to help them deal with these changes while I keep an emotional distance. I've decided not to include my family too much in our wedding arrangements, which Nathan and I are moving forward with. Although they will be invited as guests, friends who helped me through my darkest moments will play the customary family roles in the wedding. I am content with my choices as I look to the future. It's a carefully planned relationship that safeguards my mental health while recognizing the intricacy of familial ties, even though it's not the total reunion some might expect for. I've discovered that taking care of family members doesn't have to mean compromising my own health or giving into toxic relationships. There isn't a tidy, happy ending to my story where everything is forgiven and forgotten. Rather, it ends realistically, with relationships being reframed on better terms, professional assistance being sought, and boundaries being upheld. That's the best we can do at times, and that's acceptable. My last update will be this one. We are grateful to everyone who helped and counseled us along the way. I was able to strike a balance between self-preservation and compassion because of your ideas.